She came down every night to tuck her cousin in, and she saw with her own eyes these counselors
members
struggling.
Of the Camp Mystic families who lost loved ones during the horrific flood last July 4th heard very gripping and emotional testimony from an investigator who described in minute-by-minute detail what went on at Camp Mystic.
Chloe Childress and Catherine Ferruzzo, two of the counselors that died in this flood, both expressed concern to their parents in the weeks leading up to camp that they were worried. They had some anxiety about having the littlest campers and not having 3 counselors.
Had the adult staff been empowered with a written evacuation plan, training about a written evacuation plan, assigned responsibilities as part of an evacuation plan, knowledge of where the evacuation would go to, all of those adult staff members, all of those adult counselors would have had some idea of what to do up to and including 3:26 a.m. when they all safely could have gotten to higher ground.
This is a very emotional hearing of a joint committee of the House and Senate, and what they're doing is they're trying to come up with solutions to at least mitigate dangers in the event of future situations.
The Texas House and Senate have formed a joint investigative committee. This is day 2 of a grueling hearing on the investigation. Yesterday's testimony cracked the door open. Today, Texas lawmakers are kicking it off the hinges. Day 2 begins with grief still hanging heavy over the chamber after yesterday's devastating timeline presentation from Special Investigator Casey Garrett and the former Judge Michael Massengale. Their findings painted a picture of ignored warnings, failed preparation, delayed evacuations, and a culture of complacency surrounding flood danger at a camp where 27 people lost their lives on July 4th of 2025. Yesterday was about understanding what happened. Today is about accountability. Emotions are already running high as lawmakers prepare to question everyone from family members and camp leadership to government agencies and emergency response officials. The people entrusted with protecting those children are expected to face some of the hardest questions yet. Questions about warnings missed, decisions delayed, and systems that failed when every second mattered. Throughout yesterday's hearing, you could see and hear the heartbreak in the room. Families reacting to painful details, senators and state representatives openly expressing anger, frustration, and disbelief at what they'd learned. More than once, officials vowed publicly that changes would come and the responsible parties would be held accountable. And if yesterday was difficult to watch, today may be even harder. This is going to be raw, emotional, and uncomfortable. There will be moments of grief, moments of outrage, and moments that leave you speechless. But these hearings matter, not just for the families who lost loved ones, but for every parent who expects that when they leave their child in someone else's care, safety comes first. So grab your tissues, hold on to your rage, and buckle in, because there's no sugarcoating what's about to unfold today.
On the July 2025 flooding events will now come to order. The clerk will call.
Vice Chair Moody. Present. Representative Darby. Present. Representative Dyson. Here. Representative Gomez.
A quorum is present.
Thank you, Chairman Meyer. Members, the Chair now calls the Senate General Investigating Committee on the July 2025 flooding events to order. Clerk will call the roll.
Chairman Flores.
Present.
Vice Chair Perry. Here. Senator Hughes. Here. Senator Colcourse. Here. Senator Menendez.
So today we will hear invited testimony to give additional context on the information that we learned yesterday. We will hear from the Eastland family, relevant state agencies, and finally, the families of campers, both survivors and victims. Members of the public can leave comments through the comment portal linked on both meeting notices. And with that, I will open up invited testimony and call up our first panel of witnesses. The chair calls Britt Eastland, Richard Eastland, Edward Eastland, and Mary Liz Eastland. If y'all come forward, please, and take a seat. Good morning. Thank you all for being here.
Morning.
And if you would, I'm going to begin on my left. So we'll begin. Just state your name.
Yes, sir.
Your title.
My name is Richard Eastland.
And speak into the mic, and you may begin, please.
Oh, sorry. My name is Richard Eastland. I run the kitchen.
You can move the microphone up so people can hear. Your name, your title, and you speak into the mic.
Hello, my name's Richard Eastland, and I run the kitchens at Camp Mystic.
Good morning. My name is Britt Eastland, and I'm a director at Camp Mystic Cypress Lake.
Good morning. My name is Mary Liz Eastland, and I am a director at Camp Mystic Guadalupe River.
My name is Edward Eastland, and I'm also director at Camp Mystic Guadalupe River.
So you may begin.
My name is Edward Eastland, and I'm here testifying on behalf of my family, myself, and Camp Mystic. I would like to thank the Lieutenant Governor and Speaker for forming these committees, and I would like to thank the senators and representatives for serving on them. And I would like to thank the investigators for taking the time to interview us and to really listen to us. Thank you for your presentation yesterday. Judge Massengale was right yesterday, and I want to speak directly to the Heavens 27 families. I think about the night of the flood every moment of every day. We tried our hardest that night, and it wasn't enough to save your daughters. We were devastated alongside you. I regret not communicating more with each of you earlier, and I'm so sorry. Every morning, waking up is hard. Every moment of every day is hard, and yet that pain feels like nothing compared to what you're going through. To talk openly about our pain feels like I'm insulting you, so I've largely remained quiet. This flood, we did not see coming, and Ms. Garrett pointed out yesterday that my father, Dick Eastland, was on his toes that night, actively searching for information about the weather. He started looking at the weather 30 minutes before we were even in a flood warning. He looked upstream of us at the UGRA and GBRA river sensors, and those river gauge sensors were offline, so we could only rely on the gauges downstream of us. We looked at the radar. The storm was moving to the northeast and to the southwest of us. There was nothing behind it, so it felt like it had to end soon. Instead, for reasons I still do not understand, that storm cell stopped in its tracks, completely above us, anchored to our location, and swirled around us for 4 hours straight. And as the flood warnings updated, it is clear that even the experts didn't understand exactly what was happening on the ground at the time. At 3:19, the National Weather Service was predicting this to be a 5-year flood. At 3:33 a.m., they predicted it to be a 10-year flood. Ms. Garrett pointed out yesterday that my dad was underwater at 3:51 a.m. And at 4 a.m., when we were close to the peak of the flood, the National Weather Service was predicting this to be only a 25-year flood. My father called on us to start evacuating the cabins closest to our dam at 3 a.m. when it became apparent that this heavy rain event was growing into a large flood. It was the same thing he had done in 1978 and in 1987. During those floods, water never got inside any of the cabins. Our evacuation that night started off as precautionary and then quickly changed to an emergency. I understand completely when people point out the things we could have done that morning. I think about those things every day. A flood 3 feet lower would have made a lot of our actions seem better, and a flood 3 feet higher would have made a lot of our actions seem worse. I do believe that all of our actions that morning were based on reason from the knowledge we had from previous floods and in the moment. Our concept of high ground has now changed forever. Even with this flood being what it was, we feel like we have failed our parents. When you drop your children off with us, you're putting them in our care, the same way you all surely feel when your children's friends sleep over at your house. You would fight for them, you would put your life on the line for them to keep them safe. And if harm came to them, you would be devastated. These girls were our youngest campers, and they're amazing counselors who we watched grow up. The world was a better place with them in it. And the anger at us for not being able to keep them safe feels completely reasonable. I have no excuses. I have the truth of what actions I took that night, and my family is here with me, and we are honored to answer any questions you have. Sorry.
Thank you for your statement. Does anyone else wish to testify?
I don't think so, Mr. Chairman. We're available to answer any questions.
Members, any questions? Senator Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here and being willing to openly public. To be clear, everybody lost something that day, including Texas. And I don't want to discount the efforts as late as they were. I don't question you weren't doing what you thought was best at the time. But I do have some concerns and some things that we went through yesterday for sure. But specifically, it's just about where we go from here a little bit. So I think owning a camp or managing a business, period, if it's licensed with the state of Texas, is a privilege. I don't think we dole out licenses haphazardly. I think that we do it with some forethought and expectation that you're serving the public good. So would you agree? And I'm going to speak to Edward mainly because you're kind of in the line of fire in that tranche. But what would you say that being able to run a camp this long in its history, is that a privilege?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
I think so. And I was looking at the transcripts of first day, second day, and third day, and there was a kind of a, and I don't know how to explain it any different. You're currently under an application to renew a license, and there's 27 deficiencies on that application. And I would have thought, after coming out of July of 25, that every I, every T, everything on that application would have been pristine with all answers, all questions, any particular area that you could have shored up, that we got it, we got the message, we recognize shortfalls. But what I read through the transcripts was really concerning from an attitude perspective. And what I mean by that, when you personally were presented with the question, are you responsible for the app? I think your response was yes. And then the details of that application, you were very removed from, that someone else did it, and this finger pointing. And second piece of that was, it was an upload from prior year information was one of the remarks. And so it just floored me that after all that the families and the state and y'all have been through as a family, that the response could be anything but, I made a mistake, I guess I didn't read it right, or I don't know what you're asking there, but it was more of a, we just did status quo. We just followed suit and uploaded what was on the previous information on those lines. So it's kind of a cavalier, I don't mean that to be disrespectful, but this nonchalant kind of process that we're just going to move forward as if everything's okay now. And so what would you say to that perspective that I walked away from looking at that I don't know who did that or somebody else loaded it, and then 27 deficiencies post-event. How do you reconcile that?
Yes, sir. I believe you were referring to the description of activities that was uploaded. It was my brother Richard and our now full-time employee Glenn Yankee did the application, and I believe that description of activities was something that we had used years prior. It was a PDF, and it had references to the Guadalupe River, and that was a mistake.
Let me ask this, is the application different than the prior applications now, that the law, there was different sections and different things on there to ask for, and we'll have dishes up later that
Yes, sir.
some holes in that?
It was, yes, sir, it was different.
But you personally didn't get involved in responding to the new sections even, or did you?
No, sir, I did not.
Okay. It's important to know this, and it's not meant to be anything other than just information, I think, with the committees, but what was an average, because you run an account for 2 months, right, 2 30-day periods?
There are, at Guadalupe River, before this, it was 2 30-day periods and then 1 2-week session.
What would Camp Cypress 2 30-day periods look like as far as gross revenues go? You got 900 applications on file. What is a gross and a net revenue from that?
We didn't have the same sessions at
But
Cypress
going
Lake.
forward, what could you expect under a Cypress? 900 kids, 2 months, so it'd be 1,800 kids, I'm guessing. What is a typical gross and net revenue off of a camp operations for a summer? And you can use
I
the
don't know
prior,
that off-
you can
I-
use
I-
Mystic. So
I'm
can
sorry.
you can use Mystic then. What was a typical revenue summer for a camp?
I don't want to guess. I don't have that in front of me. I'm sorry.
Anybody
It
on
was-
the panel have a clue what the gross revenues for a 2 months camp operation looks like for a Mystic?
I think, thank you, Senator. I think with the enrollment we see for if we're able to, God willing, open Cypress Lake Camp this summer, we, based on the tuition we set, I think our estimates for gross revenue with the enrollment was between 3 and 4 million.
So for 1 month or for both months?
No, for the 6 weeks. We had scheduled 6 10-day sessions, so that way if there was any girls that wanted to come from Guadalupe River Camp, they could come their sessions with their friends and their cabin mates, and then we shortened our 3 sessions at Cypress Lake so that those girls could come with their friends and cabin mates.
So roughly 6 million gross.
No, sir. For both, for all 6 sessions, if we had over 850 enrolled still, my estimation was between 3 and 4 million gross.
Okay, 3 and 4 gross. And service business, my background of a CPA, usually net around 50% of that, so to speak, and have some general overhead. So a lot was made yesterday about the ability to find counselors. It's hard to find counselors, and it's hard to find workers, period. It's just a different environment today. What's your pay for a counselor? How much do you pay for senior level counselor?
Yes, you're right. It depends on their age, but it's around $1,000 per counselor.
For the camp?
Yes.
And
If I
if
could
you're
stop for just a moment, if you can please state your names.
Oh, I'm sorry,
when you
Mary
speak.
Liz Eastland.
For the
In a
record.
normal
Thank you.
summer, like a 2025 summer, a normal sessions, different than what we would try to be doing this summer. It was around 1,000, but it changed for different certifications you had or different heads of things, you know. So I say $1,000 as a ballpark.
So compared to a private sector job where a kid might work at Starbucks, it'd be $15, $16 an hour for 20, 30 hours. They're not doing it for the money,
Correct.
obviously.
Correct.
But at the same time, being the market we have, if you can't find people to want to work, then typically you would raise the cost or what you're paying. So did you raise the amounts that you were paying to try to bring more counselors in?
We include bonuses for bringing friends, things like that, and then each year we do increase the pay a certain percentage, just in general.
But you really didn't do anything different
No, sir.
with the,
I didn't have a hard time finding counselors for second term, 2025. It was our most popular term.
okay. My understanding is you get up at deposit, is it 50% of deposit?
For campers?
For this this current licensing, you've got deposits on file?
Yes, sir. The application deposit is $400, just flat.
Okay, it's just a flat application fee. It's not an actual deposit.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Fully refundable.
Fully refundable. Have you used any of that money to bring this next camp up to speed to meet the new criteria? And I understand it's a little higher ground, but clearly there are things that you didn't have until after the bills passed. So how much of your resource, and you may have borrowed money to do it, I don't know where you're getting your money, how that's working, but how much have you invested in this new camp?
Thank you, Senator. If it's okay if I talk,
Sure.
being the director of Camp Mystic Cypress Lake, first off, thank you all for forming this committee. Really appreciate all your efforts and improvements going into the future based on everything that's happened. I'd also like to point out that appreciate y'all appointing these investigators, Ms. Garrett, Judge Massengale, Kim and Heather. They've all been so professional and very kind and respectful to all that people they've interviewed. We have supported the Heavens 27 legislation, and we knew that if we were ever going to, again, be able to operate camp, we needed to go above and beyond, and we had no plans to open the Camp Mystic Guadalupe River campus this summer especially. And because Cypress Lake did not have sustain any flood damage, we were fortunate, but we knew still we needed to go above and beyond all this great legislation. And so we got together with area camps. We were grateful to know that funding would be coming for government-funded flood alarm and alert systems, but we wanted to get ahead of it to show any parents that had concerns that we were going to go ahead and make sure these were implemented before the summer. And so we've probably before this summer, our Hill Country area camps, West Kirk County will have over 100 River Sentry towers, a company that was formed after the flood from Liberty, Texas. And also it's not part of the legislation, but we are putting in 2 huge generators that will back up the office and our dining hall, so we will have power to communicate with emergency personnel, given that, as y'all know, cell service is still pretty bad in our area. We're working to get a tower as well on one of our large hills, so our whole community can benefit. And so we will be able to have power and water for our pump in case of emergency. Also, I don't think it was part of the legislation for walkie-talkies. I think most camps did not have walkie-talkies in cabins, but we are going to have walkie-talkies in every cabin with NOAA weather alerts. That way counselors can automatically hear any weather alerts in their cabin with their campers. And we are going to implement extensive training on evacuations, not just for flood, but for fire, tornado, intruder. And we're going to, specifically for some of those evacuations and emergencies, we're going to have training for our counselors they always come a day and a half before campers come, and we will train them, and within 48 hours we will conduct drills for our campers and staff. We have now a gatehouse at Cypress Lake outside the entrance. We're going to have 24-hour security at all times this summer, again, if we're allowed to operate. And we have done a flood risk assessment, Senator, that proves that all cabins are out of the 500-year floodplain at Cypress Lake, and all of them except 2 are out of the 1,000-year floodplain. And we have already made corrections to those deficiencies that you named, and we'll be submitting them probably today or tomorrow.
So kind of go to your dad, is it fair to say pretty heavy-handed as far as outside what he thought was right? Let me ask it this way. All of these things should have been being done anyway, even under current code, evacuation plans. Shelter in place is not an evac plan by definition, right? And so now you all have an evac plan. Now you are going to do muster. Now you're going to do all these things. But I want to remind people that stuff was already supposed to be done. And I've said it 100 times yesterday. I'm almost certain none of the other camps were doing any of it either. And if I'm wrong on that, I apologize. But just the flavor of that industry right now. So your dad actually evac'd in prior floods. So it wasn't something that he wasn't willing or wanting to do or could do, or he just chose not to do it for different reasons. But my thought here is hindsight's 20/20 for both eyes, both lenses. But at the same time, that doesn't excuse the outcome or the consequences. So I'll say it this way. I don't think, and I'm going to separate the conversations from keeping a camp open or not. I think Mystic is a camp. I think at the end of the day, who operates that camp is really a different conversation. And when dishes comes up, the line of questioning that I'll have for them is at what point, and they're going to just say, well, it's up to the legislature. And I want to be clear, at least from this legislator, not legislature, but this tour, that there's a point where the consequences of not doing your job is so significant and so consequential that you don't have the privilege of running a business that you were prior to. And I think that comes from a lot of different policy perspectives, but our system of justice has a large deterrent factor in it. And my perspective is if y'all are left as a operator in any form or fashion, what deterrent does that send to another operator that I can have kids die on my watch and still be an operator? I think we're in a really hard position here because there is no easy answer, and there's no answer that doesn't impact people. But I just don't believe, honestly, with the investigative facts that lined out, and I'll use the very experience that your dad had, and the fact that in prior floods he exercised good judgment, but he missed it on this one. And then when you compound it with the whole air of disconnect from communications, well, that's great. I want my kids to be disconnected from phones, but you still have to have a level of responsibility and accountability in your leadership teams that have to be connected. And that was just a significant, and I bet you again, every camp has that policy. But here's where I'm at. We have to make a decision going forward. So I said it yesterday, the rehashing of this issue for parents and have to relive this whole scenario every day of their lives all over again is somewhat contingent upon how y'all react after this hearing. Because what we're going to hear from DISHS today is literally because of government code and short-sightedness of it not being able to accommodate a camp owner that has had loss of life other than an accidental, something they should have been able to prevent. It's going to allow a process play out past the camp season. So legally, y'all probably get to stay in existence. But I will tell you from this guy's perspective, and I don't know what my other members are, whatever statute tweaks, whatever laws we make, or whatever rules we have to devise, y'all will not be an operator next session, next season, if I can have anything to say with that. Because you just missed it, and it was tragic. But Mystic itself can stay with a different operator. But that's where I've evolved to after going through this twice now, yesterday and at the sites. There just has to be a certain level of finality to it. And leaving you as an operator doesn't provide that finality. And again, loss of life on both sides.
Chairman Meyer.
Members, any questions? Speaker Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here and participating with the investigators. As they've reported to us, you've sat with them for a number of hours and have given unfettered access so that they can do their job. And that allows us to do our job. So I want to thank you for that. It's hard not to recognize, and I think Casey said yesterday, like there's a crater of trauma. I kind of think about it when you drop rock in water and how it ripples out. The ripples of trauma are all over that region, within your own family, with the other families that we're going to hear from later today. We've heard from members of the community. And so we are not ignorant of that. In fact, I think it sits very heavily in this room. And so I want to ask each one of you, I know you all are people of deep faith. Part of the mission that y'all engage in is faith-based and rooted in faith. I'd like to ask each one of you, what are you individually doing? I can hear it in your voice, Edward, right?
Yes.
You talked about there's not a day that goes by. And we heard the timeline of events, and you're a real person that went through that, and we can sit and look at a timeline, but that was what was going on and the things that you were experiencing. What are you doing? What are the rest of y'all doing to deal with your grief and your trauma? What have you been doing since this? Because, as you said, it sits in your mind every day, as well it should. So what are you doing to bring yourself to a point of healing or trying to process what is really incomprehensible?
So I have a lot of wonderful people who are helping me, especially my wife. We've never been closer. My faith has never been stronger. I'm also getting counseling. I think we all are. But I just have a mantra ever since, just do the next right thing. And I'm trying to do that. And sometimes it's hard to find out what the next right thing is. And the amount of time that has gone by is, it feels like this happened last week still for me. It's not necessarily, every hour's different. Every hour, I have good hours, I have bad hours. It's just, all I can do is do the next right thing. And that's what I've been living by.
Okay. Would y'all be comfortable sharing what does that personal process look like for the other three of you here?
I think it's similar. Edward and I have a similar process. We work together a lot, and we work with professionals, counseling, and different things. And I think I've always just said do this hour, and whatever that next thing in the hour is. And just keeping our family together and taking care of what's right in front of us.
Thank you, Representative Moody. I also am receiving therapy counseling. I meet with someone different than the therapist that I meet with. I go also with my wife, and I also have been trying to just pour into my family and our close friends, and we pray every day to God. We'll never understand why this happened, but we just trying to, like as Edward and Mary Liz said, we're just trying to do the next best thing every day and lean on Him. And there's not a day that goes by that we don't pray for these precious girls and their families, and for so many in our community. And the last thing we want to do is create any more pain for these wonderful families that are grieving. We feel like we'd be just like them, very angry when their most precious treasure is taken from them. And we just pray that there will be kindness through this process as facts continue to come out. We just believe. I read Ephesians 4:32 this morning, that we just pray that as the facts continue to come out, that hearts will heal, and that people will understand that we did our absolute best in unimaginable circumstances. And I think I just want to say one other thing that I appreciate Ms. Garrett stating that appreciate all the work she's done in the past couple months in her investigation. But I know time was limited, and she wasn't able to talk to experts that we believe, hydrologists and engineers, if the investigation can continue, will help determine the magnitude of this flood, and also hopefully understanding everything by talking to people in our community that were affected. I think that helps get a big picture of what happened. But we're just praying that, and we know time will help.
Hello, Representative Moody. Like my other family members, I did seek counseling. I've been lax in it. I don't know. The grief has been in waves. There's some days where you can function and some days where you can't. I don't think I've done a very good job of dealing with the grief. And I find peace in my family, and I find peace in our community.
I appreciate that, and I guess I ask that because none of these things is happening in a vacuum, right? It's our understanding that folks have applied and want to come back to be in your care. And so I think it's an important question to ask of where you all are at in that process. Because how does that, and whoever wants to weigh in on this, how do you think your personal journey in dealing with that trauma and grief will impact how you manage and care for children as you're still moving through what is an incredibly difficult process?
Well, so a few weeks ago, we had open houses at the Camp Mystic Cypress Lake, and I told a lot of the parents this. I was anxious to see how I would react when they came, but it was the most amazing 2 weekends, being surrounded by campers, by wonderful parents, and it felt like the best thing for us at the time, and it was wonderful. And I know that it sounds like, I mean, we've changed, definitely, but we are in that camping industry that only people in it understand, and we absolutely love what we do, and we just have this incredible peace with working at a summer camp.
But I will say, I think we're willing to take a step back if camp can go on. That's okay with us. If we are willing to step back and take a pause as this family, I think that's appropriate and okay, and I'm willing to do that.
I appreciate, Mary Liz, I appreciate you saying that. And you mentioned Ephesians 4:32, which talks about kindness and compassion. It's in short supply in our world in general. But when there's such grief and trauma, it's through kindness and compassion that possibly there's a level of healing that can take place. And I don't think that's a short journey. I don't think it's a journey that can be traveled in the next handful of weeks. I think it's a lifelong journey for everybody that went through this. And so I appreciate you sharing that with us, because we can talk about code provisions and bureaucracy and checklists. And I'm sure we're going to do a lot of work on those things. But those are empty words on paper if they don't meet with people on the ground that are doing the right thing as best they can, one day at a time. And I know that I won't speak for all of my colleagues, but I'm not here to create a checklist. I'm here to try to figure out how we change a culture of complacency that we were, very clearly talked to about. And to Senator Perry's point, I don't think this is limited. I think this is probably pervasive. And as a young father who's sending my son to camp this summer for the first time, I think about these things in a more profound way than I ever have. And we need to figure out how to do that in a way that works for everybody and that is respectful of the very profound loss that's taken place, yours and everybody else's. So thank you for sharing that. I know that's personal to share, and so I appreciate you doing that. I want to talk about communication. I know we, last summer, heard from officials from Kerr County, City of Kerrville, the River Authority, and for those of us that sat on those committees, I don't think you'll find many of us that were satisfied with the level of communication going on the ground. And so we did not get to hear from you all at that point in time. And so if any of you or multiple of you want to weigh in on local communication, either from the county, the city, emergency personnel in the run-up to the flood, or I'd say we heard a lot about post-event, just chaos. Anything that you'd like to add to some of that from your perspective, operating the camp?
I'll speak to some of that. You mentioned beforehand, before the event, Edward and I do serve on the Hunt Volunteer Fire Department, and we did not get any communication from them before, if you're talking about local people.
Was that because of the inability to receive communication because of
No.
issues with, or that it was possible to receive communication, you just didn't?
I'm talking about maybe July 3rd. We could have gotten an email if information had been given to the county and then dispersed among the volunteer fire departments. We would have gotten an email about that. Any kind of alert would have come that way, and we didn't receive that. So there's a local issue there, whether they saw the TDM alerts or what they knew before, what they zoomed in on. Those things that were brought up yesterday. I'm not sure where our community leaders fell in that, and I can't speak on that. But I know that we didn't get any information from our local fire department, and I don't think they had any information. Post-flood, I will echo the chaos. I did the best that I could, and I did not do well. I will admit that. I didn't do perfectly, and I don't admit to do perfectly, and I tried my best to communicate with everybody that I could with the resources that I had. And then once the Texas Rangers took over, there was more, but then there was still a disconnect with the EOC and who was giving information to whom. And there was a lot of disconnect there.
Okay.
That's from my perspective. I don't know if anybody else wants to add.
Do you have anything else to add on that front?
I don't believe so, but what specific do you mean with the first people who came out to camp with their communications?
Well, I think and I'd like to hear about that, because I think just knowing what that interaction looked like for you all there. Who is it? What are they saying? What are they doing? And then that, I know we're going to hear from TDM a little bit later and understand. And we heard from them for a significant amount of time last summer about their decision to deploy resources to the area in anticipation of the flood. So, there were things moving on the ground. There's a disconnect here somewhere, and that's what I'm trying to drive at.
That's kind of my point in mentioning our local volunteer fire department. I don't think they knew any. I don't know that, I can't speak to it, but from the information that we got on our end as members, we did not hear about any deployment of resources to our county, to our area specifically. I don't know that that's true or not. I'm just telling you what I know from my.
That wasn't information that flowed down to you all.
Correct. And then the first person that came on the scene at Camp Mystic that I saw was the game warden. And I gave him the list of people that we were missing at the time and the number 27. And there was a lot of false information. I think they mentioned on Facebook, everybody saying everybody at Mystic was found. And I specifically was texting people that I knew that person to please take that down. That is not true. I wanted to make sure true information was getting out as quickly as I could. And the first person I was able to get that to was the game warden, who was the first person I saw on site. I don't know if y'all saw anybody else on site before that.
Richard Eastland. On the 5th, the governor came out, and Chief Kidd came out as well. And my brothers, my sister-in-laws, they were in town. So I was the only one at the camp to guide them around. I showed them the buildings and what happened in a sort of a similar tour that y'all did. But Chief Kidd and Governor Abbott did ask, what do y'all need? And I asked for two things. I said, we need security here at the camp because people were coming in. I was afraid of just somebody coming in and messing with something. And then I specifically said, and we need more people looking. We need more search and rescue. And I will say, they stepped up and they did a very good job on both of those things.
Okay. In prior years, was it normal for the local emergency personnel to communicate with you about risks or anything else in the area? Was that a common type of communication, or was it always lacking?
No, our Hunt Volunteer Fire Department is very good about sending information. Typically, it's about burn bans in our area, and so we frequently get emails from them about local needs and about training and about. It's a lot of lovely older men volunteers that send a lot of different emails and would have sent that information had they had it.
And if I may speak also, Representative Moody, going back to July 4th, I was very impressed by the response by Tatum definitely after the flood. I can't say to the effect what Tatum, to my knowledge, our local officials did not get what Tatum was laying out in the days before the flood. But after the flood happened, when we had no power, no Wi-Fi, no electricity, and I found out a little bit after 7 a.m. Just the nightmare that appeared to be happening at the campus next door at Camp Mystic Guadalupe River, because I was at Camp Mystic Cypress Lake. I went up with one of my sons and with Glenn Yunke to the highest point I could get to, where we got one bar of service and started making calls to 911. I made 2 different 911 calls. I'm not blaming anybody. The weather was still pretty bad, a horrible time to come in by helicopter. But when no one was coming fast enough, in my mind, I made a phone call to a contact that I knew might be able to get somebody, and he put me in touch with Nim Kid right away. It was sometime after 9 o'clock, and Nim Kid told me with all confidence that he would be sending help. And shortly after, probably less than an hour, the game wardens showed up a little after 10 a.m. and started taking control. So that's my perspective on what happened on July 4th that morning.
Okay. I know we've had some conversation about counselors, ages of counselors, who they were supervising, the number per cabin. My legislative director was a Mystic camper, and so had a little bit of personal experience in understanding the history of the camp just from within our own office. I think we talked about yesterday, we're trying to identify when that ratio started to struggle to stay at 3. Because I think, as Ms. Garrett pointed out yesterday, even the most routine things could become problematic if you're short-staffed in the cabin. So when did that start to erode, I guess, for lack of a better term?
I want to just take a minute to recognize our amazing counselors. We have an amazing group of counselors that return year after year, and they were heroes that night. They really were. And I told them that next day, that they were incredible. And we have counselors that come for 3 and 4 years and then go off, and they are leaders in our country. And it's really incredible. And we watch them grow up, and I just can't say enough wonderful things about our counselors. I think we have the best counselors in the state, but maybe I'm biased. I don't think there was an erosion. I think the industry standard is interesting for counselors, and I think you all have done a really good job with your new act, the Camp Health Safety Act, to put the ratio such in the cabins that you did. I think that would be really wonderful going forward in camp safety. We didn't have that before in terms of in the cabin ratios, and so I think that's a really good addition that you did, and I would keep that. A lot of other camps often ask us, how do you keep your campers coming so long? Because we actually have industry standard. For example, our son, this will be his last year as a camper, and he's 16. He'll be a counselor at 17, still in high school. So we have always had campers go until 17 and then become counselors later, just to set a little bit of an industry standard there. And if you look back in our memory books, similar to the way that Ms. Garrett did, you will see that back in the 80s, even we had 2 counselors and twins often because of the size of the cabin and the number of campers in the cabin. It's not always about, it's more about how many campers are in a cabin. For example, I was a counselor in 2003, and I had 13 campers with 1 other counselor. So it's not necessarily an issue or an erosion issue. It's just how we staff within the camp in our business. I'm not sure how other people staff. I don't know that they have 3 in a cabin in other places. I don't know what that standard is, which is why I'm thankful that you put that in there so that we can have a better industry standard across the board, and we support that.
Okay. So not necessarily something that eroded over time, but it was staffing decisions made each individual session.
Yes.
As to what? Okay.
Thank you. Yes.
What? And I might come back with some more questions, but I just want to end with this, and whoever wants to answer. Obviously, we've gone over everything in pretty fine detail, but based on your judgment, your personal judgment, do you think you met or exceeded the safety expectations of campers in the summer of 2025?
Thank you, Representative. This is Britt Eastland. I believe, based on what we knew then, we acted reasonably, but now that we know what this river can do, we're thankful for the legislation, and we're ready. Everyone, I think, in the camping community is ready to make changes, and we're thankful for the great legislation y'all put forward.
I've been more instrumental in the infirmary side. And I have worked with our camp doctor, who's our medical director, and we have a good plan in place for safety and medical, and so I can speak to that. And then I think that we've improved a lot of safety in different areas that maybe haven't been touched on. For example, we used to do a river water safety, but it wasn't an American Red Cross lifeguarding course. And so in 2011 and 12, I became a lifeguard, and then also became a lifeguard instructor, and since then have increased our water safety in lifeguarding. And that's just one example of things that we've done to increase safety before this.
Okay. I think the phrase used yesterday quite a bit was a culture of complacency. You do things the way you do things now because you always did them that way before. This worked in 1978, 1987, so it'll work now. And again, whoever wants to weigh in on that, I'd like y'all to give us your perspective, because that's what we keep hearing and being talked about. You all are the operators. Can you talk to me about a culture of complacency? Is that something that, obviously, hindsight 2020, is that something that you can reflect on and look back at? And do you have something to tell this committee about that?
That's a very good question, Representative. I don't think that we had a culture of complacency. I would disagree with that. I think my father was very diligent that night. I know that we failed these families behind us. I do know that. And if we could change anything about it, if we could have done the things that y'all have thought of, that we have thought of, we would do it. But we, just like every year, we would think, how can we make camp more fun? We would also think, how can we make camp more safe? And over the years, we see those little things. We do those little things. That night, I don't think my dad was complacent. I think he was diligent. He was up early. He was checking for information 30 minutes before that 1:14 a.m. warning. I know people are upset that he didn't act on what we know now, but he was looking for that information, and he couldn't find it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. There was, I think it was a text message shared with us where there's reference to a 4-inch rise in the water, 4-inch rise in the water, I think is what it stated. I think it was a text to your
maybe
mother.
my mother?
I think to your mother.
Yes.
I think it was 4 inches of rain.
It was 4 inches of rain or 4 inches of rise? Okay,
inches of
all
rain.
right.
So
2:33 a.m. 2:33 a.m. speaking. 2:33 a.m. 4 inches.
Yeah. And is there any significance to that amount? We've heard some testimony. There is some significance to that marker. What is its significance to you all when that's a data point that's known at about 2:30 in the morning?
Yes, I think Ms. Garrett specifically talked about how that would have meant something to my father because he served on the UGRA when he called Edward and he said, we've had 2 inches of rain. That meant something to my father. When he texted my mother and said, we've had 4 inches of rain, that meant something. And I think that does go to that 114 alert. You look at, here, let me just pull up what the information was. So a lot of talk about that 114 flash flood warning has been about just the warning itself. You were warned. but the context of the rainfall amount is important. They said between 1 to 2 inches of rain have fallen. The expected rainfall rate is 2 to 3 inches in 1 hour, and additional rainfall amounts of 1 to 3 inches are possible in the warned area. And y'all, if you like the flash flood watch from July 3rd, talked about 1 to 3 inches expected, and up to, I think, 5 to 7 inches isolated. But you don't know what that does to our basin, right? That amount, you don't know if that's tremendous or if it's less. But to my father, it did mean that it meant something. The amount of rain we got in a 24-hour period in that basin was 16 inches. It was 16 inches. And even more importantly, it was almost 12 inches. I think it's 11.94 inches of rain in a 3-hour period. And it's about the time that rain is coming down, because over a longer amount of time, it's not as bad. Shorter amount of time, it's very bad. And that was not accurately showing what was happening. Those warnings were not showing what was happening on the ground. And so when I say my dad was in the dark looking for that information, he couldn't find it because the radar wasn't showing it, the National Weather Service wasn't showing it, and the gauges that were upstream of us on the South Fork were no longer in service.
Thank you all for that. I may have some other questions as we circle back around, but that's what I have for now. Thank you so much.
Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you each for being here. No one, I don't believe anyone has any doubt for your love of those children and your loving what you do and what your family has done there. Many of us represent folks back home who lost children, and then other Mystic families who did not. And we know that it's a close-knit community and really a unique community, and y'all certainly know that as well. We have to talk about these things, and we don't apologize for that. We have to ask these questions, and we thank you for cooperating with us. With the chair's discretion, I'm going to have a few, and we'll probably come back and visit again before we're done. But I want to go back on a couple of things that Speaker Moody spaded up, which I also had in my notes. In Mrs. Eastland on counselors, I want to learn a little bit more about that. Thank you for, you mentioned it in your remarks, and then Speaker Moody asked you about it. So Ms. Garrett talked about speaking with other families, other Mystic families from years past. And I want to say, even folks I've heard from, there is this sense that that the default was 3 counselors per cabin, but it sounds like we were wrong about that. I'm not fussing at you. I want to understand. We were talking about an erosion. I think Ms. Garrett was trying to say maybe it's harder to get counselors. She was maybe trying to figure out why. But is that a false impression that the default used to be 3 counselors per cabin? I know there's ratios overall, but getting back to cabins, regardless of what the law was that the default at one time, or were we mistaken about that? The 3 counselors per cabin.
I think that's a good default, yes, but I think it is all dependent on the size of the cabin and the number of campers in the cabin. So it's not necessarily default for each cabin. For example, the Twins 1 and Twins 2 cabins are small, and my father-in-law actually wanted to remodel them and make them bigger, and I said no because I like them smaller with the smaller amount of campers. And so then you go into larger cabins, like one of our cabins on the hill is called Hangover, and that has maybe 40 campers. So it's different for different size buildings and different amount of campers in that age group. It is not a default. A goal is to have 3 in cabins, yes, but there are varying degrees of need for different reasons.
So that's helpful. So the goal will be to have 3, but depending on the cabin, that may or may not be the case.
Correct. Like I had 13 campers. It would have been a lot to have 3 counselors when I was a counselor with just one other counselor in 2003.
And so if we were talking about Bubble, for example, or Twins 1 and 2, as smaller cabins, are you saying they would tend to have less than 3 anyway? Or I don't want to put words in your mouth. I want to understand.
Thank you. Yes, sir. And like I said, looking back, even starting in the 80s, there were oftentimes 2 counselors in Twins and Bubble because of the number of campers in those cabins.
And let me pause for a minute and ask if anybody else remembers that differently. I'll ask each of you. Is that nobody's lying, but is that everybody else's recollection? Y'all have been there at different times. Some of us are different ages. Everybody agree with that? Mr. Eastland?
Yes, sir. When I was growing up, it was not uncommon for 2 counselors or 3 counselors. It depended upon the cabin.
Mr. Eastland?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, that's my recollection, and also that's actually what we did at Cypress Lake Camp, which opened in 2020. It's about half the size of the larger Guadalupe River Camp, and it was because our cabins are smaller sizes. We often we had less counselors, and we'd have about 2 for every cabin.
Mr. Eastland?
Yes, sir, I agree with that.
Along those lines, let's talk about the ages and experience of the counselors. We that term counselorette, that came up. So based on what we heard yesterday and based on your experience, tell us if I'm a first-year counselor, what am I called? Am I treated differently? Am I categorized differently than a more experienced counselor?
You're categorized differently, but you do the same work as the other counselors, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you. It does. And I think we know the answer. What is the age of the youngest counselors? The counselors.
We ask that they have finished high school, and if you've not been a Mystic camper before, we ask that you have potentially had a year of college, that there are variances to all these unwritten rules within our business. But typically, if you have not been a camper before, we like you to have had a year of college, and if you've been a camper with us, then you can come after high school.
Do we ever have any under 17?
Not under 17, no, sir.
So maybe some still in high school. Might that be a variance depending on the circumstances?
No, sir. You cannot be a counselor if you are a high school student, but according to your birthday, you might have a summer birthday that makes you younger for your grade, et cetera. So you might be 17 in that regard.
Yes, ma'am. That was me. I understand that. Okay. Everybody else agree with that? Is that your understanding of how that worked? And any corrections or clarifications? We need to understand this very well. Mr. Eastland.
Yes, sir. We focus more on their grade level than their actual age. So things like you can't come to camp until you finish 2nd grade, and you can't be a counselor until you finished high school.
Okay. Mr. Eastland.
Yes, thank you, Senator. I would agree with what my brother and sister-in-law said.
I agree completely.
Thank you very much. And so I understand that all the counselors do the same work, regardless of their level of experience. Whether we have 2 or 3 campers per cabin, what's our policy on experience versus first-year counselors in a given cabin? Is there a policy about that?
No, not necessarily. My policy is, everybody wants to be on Senior Hill because they think that's fun, but the age of the counselor matters to me. I'm not going to put an 18-year-old with 15-year-olds because that's a difficult age gap to help control them, basically. And so the younger counselors are put with the younger campers because they also were just campers, and they are incredible at answering all the several questions the 8-year-olds have about all the things, and so they do a wonderful job, or ETS do a wonderful job with the younger campers.
Okay, thank you. For my next question, we're going to focus on the flats.
Okay.
So not Senior Hill, so generally younger girls than Senior Hill, but cabin by cabin, there's a relative age difference in the girls. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir. They 8 years old through 12, 13. It's basically elementary age on the flats, to keep it simple.
So for the youngest girls on the flats, is there a policy about whether they have experienced counselors? Is it just whoever wants to serve in a given cabin? Tell us how that process works and how it worked going into July of last year.
Yes. On their application, they can specify the age group they want, and they can specify even a cabin that they want. And so oftentimes the twins counselors do specify, I want the babies. And so that's great, and we put them in there. The experience of the counselor doesn't matter in that scenario to me, because they know camp and the traditions very well, and they are better than a brand new counselor with babies that have questions about what kind of shoes to wear to an activity, or where something is, or what clothes to wear that day. Every counselor that's been a camper knows all those answers very well.
Everybody agree with that? Thank you.
Yes.
That's okay. Thank you. Thank you. There was we heard testimony based on interviews that on the flats, those cabins with the older girls tended to be more popular. Again, we're talking about the flats, older among those elementary school girls, that it was maybe more difficult to fill those spots in bubbles and twins because the little girls needed more help, needed more care. Did you hear that? Did you hear that testimony yesterday?
Yes, sir, I did.
And is that what do you tell us what you think about that? Is that accurate?
Well, like I just mentioned, a lot of these counselors asked to be in the baby cabins. And so I don't know how else to answer that, except that they either ask for it or they enjoy it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's not difficult to staff the twins cabins.
Okay. So if there were 2 counselors rather than 3 in Bubble Inn and in twins, that was not because of a lack of counselors. That was a policy decision we made based on all the circumstances.
Yes, sir.
And was that the case in July of last year?
Yes, sir. Those were smaller cabins with fewer campers. So like I've said, all the different variables that go into putting counselors in cabins would have pertained then as well.
Thank you. I've got a couple. Did you want to say something, Mr. Eastland? Okay, I apologize. Thank you. I didn't want to misread the cue. Thank you. And I'll ask a couple of questions now to the entire panel, and we may go down or may just see who volunteers, but the flash flood warning. I think everybody here knows the difference between a watch and a warning, and we're going to make, I think one thing we might think about doing, we probably need to do is make sure that maybe we even teach that in K through 12, so everybody knows the difference between a watch and a warning and what that means. My able team member suggested that, but there was testimony yesterday about some of the lawyers said there'd been X number of flash flood warnings, and then there was a question about how many had been during camp season. So my question, let's start with some numbers. If you know, in the last 5 years, how many flash flood warnings for the camp, the area covering the camp, during camp season, if you know? And I don't know the answer to these questions. This is not a trap. We need to know the answer to these questions. Anybody know?
No, and I would probably be the one to know more than my brothers and my sister-in-law. But that's probably what Ms. Garrett said might be accurate, that during the summer months, there were only 3 flash flood warnings since 2009. Is that what you're asking, Senator?
Well, thank you for your answer. I was starting with 5 years, but I think 2009, well, that's okay. 2009 was the measure she described it. So you believe she's right?
I have not looked at the data. I haven't. The only one that I've looked at is one from 21 that was an extremely similar warning that led to a 1-foot rise. But I'm not sure if that was during the summer months or not. I'm sorry.
And so if we're talking about the warnings received during camp, flash flood warnings, and I don't want to suggest we ignore watches. We sure can't do that. But we're talking about warnings.
Yes, sir.
So would it be fair to say that they are not common? Flash flood warnings are not a common occurrence.
I would say they're not a common occurrence. There's an engineer who told me that maybe you get 4 a year. So I'm not sure if that's true or not. But
So go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
Okay. In the context of Camp Mystic camp season, are flash flood warnings a common occurrence?
I would say we've had a lot of droughts, and so I would answer that it is not common for the 10 years that I've been there that we've gotten flash flood warnings, but I will agree with what my brother said that from what I've looked at and the hydrologist that's talked to us, that in the last 25 years it's been on average through the whole year about 4 a year, and so close to 100 flash flood warnings that my understanding estimated about 1 to 3 inches of rain.
But during camp season, do you have a sense for what the number is during camp season over that period, Mr. Eastland?
I know they've happened when I've been there, and I know they've happened when I was a kid growing up out there, but I can't give you a number.
Any thoughts on that, Ms. Eastland?
I don't have any thoughts on it. I've been at camp during flooding events, but I don't know if they were warnings or watches. I'm not sure.
Mr. Eastland?
Yes, I agree. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact number, but it's happened before, yes, sir.
Speaker Moody was talking about the 4 inches, and Speaker, I apologize for interrupting. I happened to have the timestamp, and I thought that might be helpful. Thank you for letting me interrupt. I'd like to visit a little bit more about that. Again, you have the best information on a lot of this that we're looking for, the folks who are available to testify. And so, Mr. Eastland, you mentioned that 4 inches would have meant something to your father. There was communication at 2 inches. There was communication. Now we have 4 inches. That was at 2:33. How many other flooding events or how many other storms do you remember during camp season when we got 4 inches in that time frame?
I would say I don't know about where previous floods that I had grown up out there where we were at 4 inches. But I do know that my dad, my father, would have known that because he was so instrumental in getting the 1990 automated flood system that Kerr County used, and he would look at that data upstream of us. And so those numbers that would come in would mean something to him. It would mean, oh, they had 3 inches here, and what that would mean for us downriver.
And I'd add to that, Senator, that I thank Ms. Garrett for showing that video that I guess we posted back in 2018 in the off-season in October of flooding that was happening at Mystic. And my family can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was a 4-inch rain flood that happened, which is a large flood at Camp Mystic.
So was it common to receive 4 inches in that time frame?
4 inches was not common. 4 inches was not, but it wasn't the sort of thing that would cause what happened. It was 12 inches that is what caused what happened. 12 inches in 3 hours. I asked an engineer recently, because of the watch number, the outlier was 7 inches. And I said, well, if we had received 7 inches in the sort of same time span, and he said, well, okay, you got 90% of that rain in the first 3 hours, what that would be like. And he said that if it was a 6-hour period, you would have a 50-year flood. And if it was a 3-hour period with 7 inches of rain, it would probably go about 6 inches into Bug House. I know y'all all went into Bug House. That's the last cabin on the end by the dam, and you can see the roof there where it went up. It got 11 inches inside that building. So my point here is
11 feet.
Oh, yes, sorry, 11 feet. 11 feet inside of that building. My point is, if those numbers had been what was actually happening, that would have been the kind of flood. And that was the kind of flood he was looking for. Still a very serious flood, but he was looking and seeing if that was going to happen.
Mr. Eastland, that 4 inches, 2:33 a.m., and I realize you were there and you were doing a lot at 2:33 a.m. when your dad seemed to recognize that was a big deal. Do you remember that happening before, 4 inches in that time period?
I believe it was maybe mentioned to me that night by my dad. When he first called me, he said the 2 inches in the last hour. But I don't remember. I don't think we had a conversation about the 4 inches. I know he texted my mom that.
Do you remember other storms where you got 4 inches in that amount of time?
Oh, yes, sir.
During camp season while campers were present?
Yes, sir.
How common was that?
That's a good question. We probably had. That's a good question. I don't have the answer right off the top of my head, but I'm sure we could look up the data.
Any thoughts on that, Mrs. Eastland?
I don't know the exact inches that we've gotten in previous floods that I've participated in at camp as a camper and counselor, but if there have been rises in the river, for sure, and I don't know the inches of that, but if it's 4 inches, then I've seen that. Yes, sir.
No question that your father was looking at the weather and looking at all those apps and looking at those gauges, and no question about that. And My next question is difficult, and I apologize, and it's going to require speculation. But as we go through the timeline, again, 233 was 4 inches, and then we'd had the counselors come up from the end of the road to let us know water was coming in, and then at 2:55, when Francis radios from the gatehouse, that water's in the gatehouse, and you may know, Mr. Eastland, from communications that night, I apologize, was that the trigger? Was that when your late father said, okay, we need to evacuate those girls? I'm asking. It appears to me that's what did it, but we don't know if he was looking at these numbers, looking for a number or a level or an event. Is that what it appears chronologically that that's what did it? But do you know? And then can you speculate if you don't know?
Yes, sir. When Frances called from the gate, I was trying to reach her for a while, and her radio cut off, and I kept repeating, "Frances, can you hear me?" And my dad, after one time I said that, interrupted me and said, "We need to start getting campers out of Bug House."
It was right around 3 a.m. Is that right, your recollection?
Yes, sir, correct.
Mr. Eastland.
And I could be wrong, Senator, but Edward, I think it's important. Was it still precautionary? I wasn't over there, but to my understanding, it was still precautionary for Bug House.
Yes, it was.
When you say it's still precautionary, well, go ahead, then I'll ask you what you mean by that.
Yes, so the water hadn't actually reached the floor of Bug House at that point. When we drove down there, it was touching the back side of the cabin.
That was at 237 or thereabouts.
And I believe y'all saw Bug House. It's on a hill, and one side of it almost looks like it's 2 stories. The front door is on the higher part, and so there's a corner that's closer to the river that was, I believe, in 78 and 87. I don't know if it was touching that corner, but that's what caused my dad to want to get them out just out of precaution.
Senator, you said 237. I think he's talking about 3 o'clock.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. 237 was driving back down there with the counselors to check it out, but 3 o'clock is the point where the water was where you're describing.
Yes, sir.
I'm
sorry.
I'm asking. I'm not telling it. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Eastland. You wanted to say something, I think.
Just a reminder, I think Ms. Garrett and Judge Massengill did a good job reminding everybody that they've interviewed that was, for a whole area, that was the most demonic, angry thunder and lightning storm that really anybody's ever seen. And so at that point, when Edward's saying it's precautionary, at that time when I was at Cypress Lake, checking the water levels of Cypress Creek and checking our campers and counselors to make sure I didn't need to evacuate anybody. And fortunately, it didn't get close enough to need to evacuate. But my concern at that time was if we got girls out, it was very likely they were going to be struck by lightning.
Mr. Eastland, I want to ask you a couple more things about those events right around that time. There's a photograph from our timestamp. It's 2:14 a.m., and it's with some folks from the grounds crew who had moved the canoes, which was the thing to do. That was understandable, of course. And they were in that garage, which is not far from the office, a little bit higher ground, right? It has the second story above it. Do you remember that photograph with them gathered in the garage?
Yes, sir. I took that photo.
Oh, I was going to ask because I couldn't remember if you were in it. So you took that photo. So I know things were happening fast. I know it wasn't long before you were by yourself. You, Mr. Yank, and your father were in different places trying to help. Do you know if there was any more communication, or do you remember when the last time y'all talked to that group of workers in the garage after that photograph was taken in 2:14? And what we know the water got up close to them, but not up to that level, is my understanding. Do you know when the last time you had any communication with those men there in the garage?
Yes, sir. I believe it was right around the time that photo was taken. We had, after they had moved the waterfront equipment before 2 a.m., it didn't take them long, probably took them 5 or 10 minutes, and they were driving back to their cabin. And at this point, the water on Edmondson Creek, also called Bubblegum Creek, was coming up, and the road back to their cabin crosses that creek, and so they couldn't make it back to their cabin.
Yes.
So they stopped at the garage and I guess sought shelter under there just from the rain.
Was it unusual for Edmondson Creek, Bubblegum Creek, to block their way back to their cabin?
No, sir.
Okay. So they're at the garage. Did you or your father give them any instructions, any direction, what they could do to help, what they should be doing? What was your communication with them like? What was yours first, and we'll ask about your father.
We had drove from the office to check and see if they made it back to their cabin. After I sent that picture to my wife, she was suggesting we could use some beds that campers are usually in the infirmary. That there were no campers in there, so they could sleep there for the night. We didn't expect what happened that night at that point.
So there was no communication with them about assisting, or at that point evacuation had not yet reached our, we didn't think we were at the level to think about evacuation at that point, is that right?
Correct, yes, sir.
Okay. And then do you know if your father had any communication with them beyond that?
I don't believe so, no, sir.
Was there did they have a walkie-talkie?
I believe they did, because they came after a walkie-talkie call. I didn't see someone with it on them, but I assume they had one, yes, sir.
But the communications that took place after that, when you were trying to evacuate the girls, any communication with them? Did they hear the traffic and come help, or they anything like that?
I don't believe they responded on any of our radio calls. I didn't hear them.
Okay. Were they asked to come help?
I don't believe so.
Let me say that properly. Were they asked to come help?
I don't believe so.
Mr. Eastland, did you have something on that? You were heading toward the microphone, I thought.
I was just going to confirm about the radio call, Senator. Yes, I heard one of our men named Alberto at 1:45, confirm that he would come over when my father radioed Edward and to get some of the men to come over.
And that was coming over to move the equipment?
That's correct.
Okay, so they had a walkie-talkie at that point?
That's correct.
Okay. Did you, now we understand that you were in a position to overhear the walkie-talkie communication that night? That's my recollection, is that right?
That's correct.
Did you, once the decision was made at 3 a.m. to start moving girls out of that first cabin, was there ever any communication with those workers to come help, or any communication with them at all that you recall hearing?
Not that I recall.
So they were never asked to come help?
That's correct, but just speculating, again, I was there at Cypress Lake at 3 a.m., and I think it was still precautionary. I don't think anyone, even at 3 a.m., knew what that river was going to do in a matter of seconds and minutes.
Mr. Eastland, anything on that? Do you know anything about communication with those men? They weren't too far from you, as I recall. Help us out with what was going on, what you were doing at that time.
At that time, I was not aware of the flood.
Oh, that's right.
So I was with them later on in the morning, but at that time period, I was not aware they were there.
With the indulgence of the chairs, I may have a couple more questions, but I want to ask about one more thing at this point, Mr. Eastland, and we're not here to parse your words or to take anything out of context. I made some notes, and you were talking about the plans for opening, and you said, and I may have this wrong, but I wrote down no plans to open the Guadalupe camp this summer especially. Did you, again, I'm not fussing at you. Tell us about that. Now, we realize there's no application pending for the Guadalupe camp, but what about going forward?
Well, we're praying about that every day. We don't know what the right thing is to do, Senator, and so we have no plans for this summer to open Guadalupe River Camp. But we've heard from hundreds of families. It's not been an easy decision for us to even open Cypress Lake, but we've heard from hundreds of families that they are asking us to please open, and they trust us, and they're asking us to provide healing for their daughters.
Would opening that camp, hypothetically, down the road, would that involve putting girls back in the cabins that flooded?
Absolutely not. we just as a family decided we would never put anyone in a cabin that had flooded, nor would we put any campers or counselors in a building, any building that was below that July 4th line. If we were ever going to rebuild, which, like Brett said, we don't know. It's uncertain right now. It would never be below that line.
We don't have the map in front of us, but how much of the flats would be available to you if you were going to follow that, which is a good rule, by the way, thank you, but how much of the flats would be available to reuse based on that criteria?
It would have to be on the hillside if we were going to build cabins in that location. Those cabins that were on the hillside, right below it, I think they flooded maybe 6 feet on the inside above the floor level. So, I mean, that gives you maybe some perspective of like how high up we would have to go on that hill to build there.
Mr. Chairman, I may have a few questions later if that's okay, but I'll pass for now.
Chair recognizes Chair Darby.
Thank you. I appreciate you being here. Several of us on this committee heard testimony in Kerrville. Certainly we had Senate committee meetings on the bills that came out of those meetings, and in the House as well. And so it's good that you're here before us today, and thank you for being here, for being candid and honest. I want to ask some questions, and the morning is kind of. I have a lot of questions. I'm not going to burden you today, nor this committee with all the questions that I do have. But do each of you believe that the investigative report that we received yesterday is substantially correct? Does it accurately reflect the situation on the ground that you were a part of that night? I presume you were here yesterday, and so I presume each of you heard that. Is that so? I would like each of you to comment on it. Do you believe that that report is an accurate, substantially accurate report?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Representative Darby. I feel like it was an extremely fair report. I feel like Judge Massengale and Ms. Garrett did a very good job. Like my brother Edward said, they really listened to us, and they heard us. And I thought her report was extremely accurate. And I had there were a couple little errors here and there that weren't substantial. The only thing I took, I guess, issue with was the counselor thing that we addressed earlier, and then the alert, the warnings themselves. But overall, I thought it was fantastic.
Okay. Britt?
Thank you, Representative Darby. I agree also that it was accurate in a lot of ways. My only opinion is it could be improved upon even more if the committee, recommends that. I believe Ms. Garrett admitted that she wasn't able to confirm things about the floodplain that we believe there's been some misinformation on in the media and things like that. But she wasn't able to talk to hydrologists and engineers that have studied this. And then the second group, I think would be important to, and it can be, I know the Texas Rangers are involved and we welcome that. We've been cooperating with them, and it looks like they are going to possibly do a broader scope. But I think to understand the magnitude of the flood affecting our entire community, including Camp Mystic, you have to interview some of the people affected outside of Camp Mystic.
Okay.
I thought the report was very well done. One thing that we have seen as a family is water lines in a time stamp, which I think would be helpful for you all to see that alongside their reporting and their mapping. If you do incremental times of where water level was, I think that's important too.
Well, we'll stop there. I, for one, I'm sure the committee would also be receptive. If you have information that you would like to supplement our investigative report, I think the committee chairs and the committee would welcome that. So would like to see that.
Okay.
Especially to your point about flood maps, any information you have, I think that would be important information to receive for this committee. Okay.
And yes, sir, I agree with my brothers and my wife that they did a really good job, and especially the times of where my father and Glenn and I were. I feel like that's been all over the place, where I knew what was true, and they really listened to me, and confirmed it with the cell phone data and the pictures and text messages. So I thought they did a really good job with that.
With regard to Senate Bill 1 and to House Bill 1, both chambers worked very hard to try to make some changes in not only in the statute but in the culture that we've learned about over the last few days. Did we go too far? Did we get it right? Is there things that from your perspective we should implement? And I'll ask about some of the things you've additionally done. But how about those two bills? There are some that say we went way too far. There are some that criticize us because of the broad brush that we put on paper. From your perspective, did we get it right?
I think you got a lot of things right. Like I said, I think you did a really wonderful job on some of the ratios that we talked about, and I think we would love to help you and get more dialed down on the things that we do need. I think it was a wonderful start, and we are so thankful that the parents championed that. And I think you got a lot of it right. I don't have it in front of me, but the things that we needed to change were good.
Okay.
I do think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think most of the issue is with the fiber optics requirement, and we already had that. We had that in 2016, and I do understand that some of the camps were upset about that because it would cost so much to get those. Personally, I know fiber optics is the best. I think a lot of these camps maybe have Starlink or what do you call it, or DSL, but I don't know if the fiber is something that y'all could help the other camps on if they really, I think it costs several $100,000 for some of them to get it.
The legislation created equipment that need to be brought, changes in policy, and we required a new application form with dishes. Everybody's been going through that right now. But we rely upon our operators to be forthcoming and truthful in their representations. Of course, we require our agency to verify, trust but verify. And so I'd like to direct your attention to February of 23rd of 2026, and I'm going to quote this. Camp Mystic Cypress Lake is in compliance with all aspects of the state's new camp safety laws. There is consequently no regulatory basis to deny Camp Mystic Cypress Lake its license. This was in February of 26. In March of 26, another release. The Camp Mystic Cypress Lake campus is in compliance with all aspects of the state's new camp safety laws and has implemented additional safety measures that exceed the requirements of those laws. And I'll repeat that last part. The camp has implemented additional safety measures that exceeded the requirements of those laws. Senator Perry mentioned earlier that the Department of State Health Services had noted 22 deficiencies just this past week. I guess firstly, who authorized those compliance statements that were issued in March and February, and on what basis were they made?
Thank you, Representative Darby. I'll speak to that. I first want to go back to your first question. I also agree with my brothers and my sister-in-law that I appreciate all the work y'all did to put in a great legislation for the new safety legislation was passed in August. I do wish that I do think it can be improved on. I do wish more camps in Texas were consulted on to make it even better. But I do agree that it's a good law, and I also like that in the new legislation it requires now that we know what this river can do, it requires better evacuation for camps that are even above the floodplain. But that statement was it was based on a lot of work by my brother Richard, by Glenn, and we were, just going to the statement that we put out, because we've had close to 900 families enrolled, but as you can imagine, given a lot of the tension that's out there and questions in the media about the license application process, a lot of families are wanting to make plans, and we're getting a lot of calls and questions about it, and we were confident based on everything we put into that, and we believed we had a perfect application, but we did make some mistakes, and as I mentioned earlier, we've made those corrections.
Is one of the mistakes that people draw my attention to is I guess the standard, maybe you mentioned this, Richard, that you drew from prior applications language about usage of the Guadalupe River. And I think that's created quite an emotional crisis, is the fact that according to the information you provided, part of the Guadalupe facility was being utilized, and if I can remember right, had to do with we're going to canoe, we're going to swim, and we're going to snorkel in the river.
And
Can you understand the emotional trauma just the idea of that puts forth? Please.
Absolutely, I can understand that.
Okay.
It's hard for me to go near the Guadalupe right now, so I completely understand. The mistake was mine. I took over the licensing process, and the new amendment section required several things. They required us to map our borders. They required us to show the FEMA firm map, if any cabins were within the 100-year floodplain there on that map, to show if they were over 1,000 feet away from a floodway, and so that was largely the amendment the document that I worked on, and in that submitting of that, there was also a small part on submitting your typical schedule and activities descriptions, and while doing the process, I hadn't seen that. And then here's this document that we submit every year. And so I submitted it with it. And I really regret it because I did not mean to cause that trauma. And I did not intend for anyone to believe that we were going to use the Guadalupe for this summer.
So it's your position, I guess the family's position, no part of the Guadalupe will be used if or when the license for operation of...
Absolutely. And there were other things in there, like Camp Craft had said, they were going to explore all 715 acres. That's not going to happen. But things like that. It is going to be confined to the Cypress Lake campus.
Okay. Now, you did mention additional improvements, and I presume, did you say that you're going to file the revised application that addresses the deficiencies soon? Is that right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
And you're also indicating on that application that you've made some improvements that weren't required by statute, but you thought were a good idea, including 2 generators that you installed, and I happen to agree with you. That sounds like a necessary part. Walkie-talkies installed in each cabin. I think we had language in the bills that addressed that. 24-hour security at the gatehouse, and I thought we had that anyway. I mean, that just speaks to common sense to me that you'd have somebody at the gate 24 hours and would not let them leave at 2 in the morning, or the night watchman leave at 2 in the morning. So is it your testimony today that the application that you will submit over the next few days or week will address all these deficiencies and address any other improvements that you've made to the property that would support the granting of the license?
That is my testimony. Glenn, who we hired to be our emergency coordinator, he's largely handling the emergency plan and how we're going to drill, and so he is largely taking care of those corrections. But but with talking with him. I believe that is correct, sir.
Okay, let's talk about the PA system. As you know, the committee made a field trip last week. And each of us stood by the Twins 1 and 2 cabins. And it was particularly impactful looking to my right, within a few yards, the PA system speaker. Then looking to my left and seeing the stairway to the Polish, what do you call it, commissary? What is that room?
Yes, sir. The first floor is our commissary, and the second floor, it's called Polar Palace. It was called that before we got Polish, though.
Okay.
It's just a
Polar, okay. So what's so striking about this is that there were, in Casey's view, several opportunities to act in a certain direction. I would love each of your assessments. And I recognize the problem is that most of the adults were cut off from the flats. But yet there were still some adults at the flats, either in the garage, the maintenance area, or I think we have what do you call them, the big three counselors. They're still counselors, but I guess they're seasoned folks. And they were down in the flats. I understand, Liz, you were not. You and Brett were not. Richard was there. But I guess my problem is you had access to a system that could have communicated with the camp, everyone at the camp. What happened? Why couldn't somebody at 3 o'clock said, everybody head to higher ground? I mean,
So again,
walk me through that.
I've been through this night thousands of times, and what you were saying is a good point. I would say that in that moment and how fast it rose, it did not occur to us to run inside the office and make an announcement. Every minute was spent trying to get to the next cabin that needed help. And there's a lot of things, and y'all do make good points. I'll give you that. It's not, I don't want to make an excuse for not using it, but in that moment, I was trying to get to the next cabin every time.
I get it, and that, we're all faced, hopefully never with the tragedy that played out on July the 4th, but we're all faced with emergencies in our lives and that of our families, and we are human, and humans react differently under pressure. That's why hopefully we have plans. We have talked about it in advance. We have rehearsed it. We've planned for it. We've taught it. So I think, one of the concerns this committee has, of course, was the lack of a plan that had all those aspects of it, even though required by statute. It did not exist. I think that the testimony and the report is very clear that if there was a plan, it was in Dick Eastland's head, and then you at this table executed it as he instructed you to do so. So I just it's hard to believe that you getting on a PA system as a final last-ditch effort to get people to safety, that was not even considered nor executed. And that's a nightmare. That's a nightmare. And so what we're trying to do here is create impetus and action on behalf of camp owners to develop a plan in conjunction with DISHES and TDM and other professionals that map out a plan, and then asking for that plan to be rehearsed, taught to the counselors, instructive to the students, and then actually acted out in real time to demonstrate the effectiveness of the plan. So was that never considered by the camp? I mean, did you ever have an idea that maybe we should rehearse this, or maybe we come up with a last-ditch warning on the PA system just to get everybody activated?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Representative. As you know, I was on the other side, but I think what happened that night when it became not precautionary anymore, the evacuations from Bug House, Look In, all the way through Tumble In, when it became that trigger point that y'all have made a good point in discussing, is those adults that were on the flats, they were cut off. As you probably heard testimony and read this transcript from the last TRO hearing, Glenn talked about it not coming from the Guadalupe River. There was rapids coming from Edmondson Creek, and there was no way for them to safely now come. And that's when Edward went to Twins, and my dad had already gotten to Bubble Inn, and Glenn stayed in Wiggle Inn. But yes, I hope that the scope can continue to be broadened. I think if Ms. Garrett or if the Texas Rangers are able to speak to other camps in the area, my understanding is because of the nature of that lightning storm and how angry it was, most camps would probably testify that they would have not sent their kids out in a lightning storm, and they wouldn't have heard the PA system anyway. But there isn't a day that goes by we didn't wish we tried those things.
Well, most of the deaths occurred in Twins 1 and 2 in Bubble Inn. I get it. It's lightning, it's loud, it's raining, a lot of chaos. But I would suspect that they would hear the speaker that was located right next to those cabins. And at the last minute, the fear of lightning striking them would be minimal compared to the real prospect of them being overcome by the water. I really have a problem with the word precautionary removal. Precaution ought to be a part of the mantra of every camp owner in this state. Everyone needs to be precautionary. I would have rather, as we listened to that video of taps being played the night before, and knowing about TDM's warning, they're pre-positioning swift water boats to the Guadalupe River, the forecast involved, I just hope, I pray that instead of having taps, you congregate everybody up there in their bedrolls and say, we're going to have a slumber party. We're going to move everybody to safety. It's going to rain heavily tonight. And just with utmost view to protect each one of you, we're going to inconvenience you a little bit, and we're all just going to have a big slumber party. I just hope that as we move through this and other camp owners move through this process, that the word precautionary is really meaningfully deployed and not just talked about. I do have one final question regarding the Upper Guadalupe River Authority. Richard, you had mentioned that the gauges upstream no longer were in service. I believe your dad was a member of the board for the River Authority, was he not?
He was. I know at least two times at which he was a board member in the 80s, maybe early 90s, and then most recently.
So he was a board member at the time of the tragedy on July 4th, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
One of the frustrations that the committee had in Kerrville related to the opportunities that the board had and the city of Kerrville had to deploy not only gauges but warning sirens. They applied for grants. They applied for state, federal funds to fund that. They had the taxing authority, and they had over $3 million, my recollection is, in an account that they'd raised through ad valorem taxes. But yet, when the grants came through, the board made a decision not to take those funds and install those devices, but to wait until they got more money coming from third parties than they had to raise themselves, or they had to spend themselves. Did your dad ever talk to you about that?
Not specifically about the UGRA, no. No, sir.
Why were the gauges no longer in service?
In, I believe, 1999, maybe 2000, they essentially became obsolete. And I believe the system was shut down in many ways.
So
The
that was
automated system from
that was the impetus by which your dad and others on the board
Yes.
wanted to obtain new equipment.
Yes, sir.
New protections, and I agree with that. But I'm at a loss to understand why, confronted with the dangers involved in not having that equipment, and you had the resources, and they had the resources available to pay for it, that they did not do so. But that's a question for another day, I guess. Do you have some to add for that?
Yes, sir. Though I'm not sure about what was going on with UGRA, it was my understanding that they were in the process of doing that, but maybe I'm wrong. I might be. But I do know that in 2018, he was specifically asking for these things. Ms. Garrett put up an email that he had sent to us. It had a couple of emails, the video that you saw. But there was another one where he did say, where he specifically talked about it. The only limitations are the river level sensors upstream. During a major flood event, that info can be crucial to buy precious time before it hits downstream. Back in the old days, there was a level sensor at location 9, South Fork Ranch, but it was removed years ago. To me, that is the most crucial, as it will buy us about 30 minutes during an event. Location 13 at West Perkins would be good as well. He was always trying to get that information because that information was important to him.
Representative Darby, I'd also mention that you may have heard testimony from the transcript of Glenn Yunke in the prior TRO hearing. He testified that my dad and him were looking not just at UGRA gauges in the area, they were looking at Guadalupe Blanco River Authority gauges that should have been working, and they weren't working either. And I do know one last thing that my dad was stressed about before July 4th. Actually, I had a conversation with him at lunch at camp on July 2nd or July 3rd. GBRA was heavily pushing for many in the area to spend money and be a part of a campaign to protect mussels, endangered mussels in our river, and it was going to cost camps a lot of money to protect. And so we've done a public records request on GBRA to see why those gauges were not working that night upstream from us in our area, and also asking how much money was spent on the Protect the Mussels campaign versus making sure these gauges were protecting our community.
Sorry, I would like to just add one more thing. I don't know if the USGS gauges that we have on our basin, there's one at Hunt at Shoemaker's Crossing, which is about 6.5 miles downstream from us, and the North Fork and the South Fork have converged at that point. And then the second one is on the North Fork, but we did not have one on the South Fork. I do know that there is now plans to be a new USGS gauge upriver of us, I think at the Lynx Haven Dam, and obviously I'm very happy about that.
Good, as I am. Just one question. When do you anticipate counselors arriving at Cypress Lake?
We have scheduled opening day for our first session for campers on May 30th, and the week prior we start getting staff in, but the cabin counselors wouldn't arrive until May 28th to start their orientation and training.
The statute provides you have 45 days by which to cure the deficiency, so it's your intention to cure those deficiencies quickly so that the dishes can review your corrective matters and pass upon whether or not they comply with the statute, or you comply with the statute. Is that your plan?
That's correct,
okay.
Representative.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Menendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the Eastlands, thank you for being here. I'm sure this is not an easy task. Appreciate your candor. I would like to bring a focus back to the events leading up to the 4th of July. I think we have clearly made everyone aware that Mr. Dick Eastland was very aware of the weather events. He served on the Upper Guadalupe River Authority Board. He knew the area. As a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly, yesterday's presentation, he and your mom had been working there since they graduated from college, something like that, correct? Because apparently his grandmother purchased the camp in 1939. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Okay, so if my math is, it's about 87 years that they had owned that facility. His grandmother had owned that facility, correct?
Yes, sir. My great-grandmother in 1939 purchased the camp.
And so he grew up there. Obviously, all of y'all grew up there. You were in that area. I think sometimes when the word complacency is brought up, it's thought of as in a deliberative complacency. I think sometimes complacency can occur from the fact that this is just what's always worked. In the state, we review agencies every 12 years at a minimum, whether they need it or not. We go through them. We take them apart. We look at everything. I'm not sure if y'all took apart your procedures every 12 years or not. Did you have anything like that? Did you do anything where every so many years you would look at every procedure you did, everything you did? Is there, hey, are we doing this right? Have we checked this? Is there something like that? Can any of you testify that you did something like that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I know every off-season we have several meetings as a family and with staff to find out, Senator, what we can improve on, what other camps are doing. We're members of a very wonderful Camp Mystics, members of CAMP, a very wonderful organization called Camping Association for Mutual Progress. We have a fall meeting. We have a spring meeting where we share ideas, share things that happen at our camp, things to improve on, safety things. And so it is a year-long process that we're always evaluating and trying to do better.
Okay. Thank you. On June 27th, there was last year, counselors arrived for training. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Who was in charge of the training of the counselors?
Edward and I do the training of the counselors with the big three.
Okay. In that training, do you go over the medical information? I have a little cutout here that was on a slide yesterday that said medical information for counselors, counselors' responsibilities. Do you all go over that with them?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
In the slide that I saw, it had number 3, floods. And then under 3, it said, A, stay in your cabins, exclamation mark.
Mm-hmm.
Then after that, it says, you will be informed of proper procedures over the PA system. Mm-hmm. Is that what you were aware of?
Yes.
So then if you're a counselor and you've gone through this training on the June 27th, and it's storming on July 3rd, or the evening, the early morning hours of July the 4th, and you had just been trained a few days earlier, we stay here because we will get information over the PA system. Would you not expect that that's what they would understand, since that's what you told them, correct?
Yes.
But that's not what happened, correct?
Correct.
Then on number C, it says, when in doubt, get help, exclamation mark.
Yes.
So if you're a counselor in Twins 1 and 2, and there's only 2 counselors,
Mm-hmm.
and the other counselor has the night off, how do you get help and leave the kids behind?
You go to a neighboring cabin
Mhm.
and say, hey, I need to run to the infirmary with this camper, I need to go to the office,
Mhm.
and that's typically what happens.
That's what you tell them to do?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Because then, under counselor responsibility, it says at least one counselor should be in the cabin at all times, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that makes sense. We've heard a lot about apparently not a decision to go from 3 to 2 camp counselors, but apparently all of you have said you agreed that the investigators report, Judge Massengale and Ms. Garrett's report, was accurate and you felt good about it. I think there was one exception. You'd like some more hydrological experts or floodplain maps, but other than that, I think you felt it was a good report. Is that correct?
Yes. Like I said, I think it's important to see incremental water levels
Mhm.
along decision-making decisions.
But in her report, in her presentation yesterday, she presented to us that over the years and in interviews with other people that had been there for years, they had been experiencing 3 camp counselors and not the 2.
I agree that is a good rule of thumb, but I think that's opinion, not fact.
So the question that I have is so was safety ever taken into consideration when only having 2 counselors and maybe the ones with the youngest campers, the ones that needed the most help?
Was safety?
Yeah, the safety of the campers.
Yes.
Was it taken into consideration? Let's say if you have a cabin with 15-year-olds, they're much more able-bodied to be able to wade through 2 feet, 3 feet water than an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old. Would you not agree?
It depends on the water, I guess. I don't know.
No, I'm just comparing a 15-year-old to an 8-year-old.
To
The
wade-
size to be able to move through water. Wouldn't a 15-year-old be stronger and bigger than an 8 or 9-year-old?
Yes, my children waded through water
Yes,
that night.
agreed. But they had, my understanding is 2 adults with them at the time, or 3. I think it was you, Tweety, and the lady who works for y'all.
They waded on their own, yes.
Correct, okay. So there was no decision on changing or moving from 3 to 2 counselors. It was just something as it worked. The inspection that occurred on July 2nd, the state sent out, let's go look at the slide. The inspection sent out Inspector Maricela Zamaripa. Did the inspector meet with any one of you when the inspection occurs?
Yes, she mainly met with me, but we also went to Cypress Lake and met with met with Richard at both kitchens, met with Mary Liz at both infirmaries. So she saw all of us.
So under the section that says required emergency plans, there's a question that says here, is there a written plan of procedures to be implemented in case of a disaster, serious accident, epidemic, fatality, and is it posted in the camp's administrative on-site office and location? Is that a question that was posed to you?
Yes, she asked for my my plan, and there's a binder on the bookshelf right next to where she was sitting.
Okay. Then the next question is, are all camp staff and volunteers made aware of the plan of emergency to be implemented during the staff training program or volunteer briefing? And there's an answer. Did she ask you that question?
I believe she did. I can't remember exactly what she asked on the 3rd, but it was probably something like that.
And the final question is there documentation of this training kept at the camp's administration? So basically, did you document that you had trained the staff, volunteers to meet? So do you have that documentation? Because the answer is yes, here.
I don't remember being asked that specifically, but I think, I don't know if the documentation of the emergency procedures, she was able to see that, yes.
But the drills, too, it says that all camp staff and volunteers were made aware of this training. And so the question is, just recently, I think it was Richard just said a few minutes ago, Glenn, who we hired to be the emergency coordinator, will run the drills. I heard him say that.
Yes, sir.
Who was hired to run the drills prior to last year?
I don't believe she asked about drills.
Was anybody running drills?
No, sir.
Okay. That's kind of where I'm trying to get to. On the application, who reviews the application for camp counselors? Who evaluates those and hires them?
I do, yes,
Okay.
sir.
So I went and pulled up one of those applications, and I was looking at them, and there were a lot of questions about values, their stance on tattoos, drug use, which is all fair, I guess. But I didn't see a lot of questions about qualifications to be like counselors, like CPR training, water safety training, first aid, or even child safety training. I'm just trying to figure out, did those things come, when you were weighing who you would hire, were there qualifications on how they could assist the children in case of emergency? Were those important?
There are sections on there where they can add the training that they've had.
Okay.
I don't have it in front of me, but they can check a box about different trainings they've had.
Okay.
And then there is a question about how you've dealt with kids before, if you've worked with kids before. So there's opportunity to enter those information there. And then we do offer to counselors, we offer every counselor the opportunity to come to lifeguard and CPR training, and that happens before camp.
And if you have this application process, how long does it normally take? I mean, when do you start, trying to get people to apply and review applications? How long do you normally take in the process to get ready for camp?
We open the applications typically in November, and then
November months prior to the summer.
Yes, sir. Because some counselors know their plans early, some know internships later. It's just varying on the counselor's part.
So, but then yesterday we also heard that one of the camp counselors got a friend of hers to apply, and she came in and started just recently. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That's the process to apply and get hired is the same whether it's 3 days before or 3 months before.
Does it give you time to review the application? I mean, do you do background checks on the?
Yes, we do background checks, and we do interview process, and I review the application.
Okay. So you
they also provide references. Excuse me, sorry for that.
So that's okay. If they don't have the training, do you require training? I know that you said you offered it. So do you require it? If they don't have it, will you train them?
We require it for the lifeguards. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
All right. Very good. Yesterday I heard that there was a desire to protect the bubble, keeping some parents at arm's length. And I'm just curious, was that one of those things that had been sort of that way because it's always been that way, or is that a decision? How did that happen? I mean, the trying to keep parents at arm's length or protecting the bubble, maybe keeping information, I'm not sure. I'm just trying to see if you could help me with that.
I don't know what that exactly means. I was confused about that as well. I don't know what that means.
Okay.
That's never been instructed to me as an employee to do any of that.
Okay. Thank you for, many of my questions have been answered, but I appreciate your time today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The chair acknowledges Representative Gomez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to start off by thank y'all for being here. I know this is extremely hard, but we heard an extensive investigation yesterday because none of us were there that night. And it sounds like some of the individuals who are sitting at this table weren't even part of the investigation or part of the facts that gave rise to some of the conclusions we heard yesterday and are somehow still commenting on them, and I understand that. But there's family, when we talk about the ripple effect of trauma that we heard earlier, there's family members here who still have answers, still have questions that need answers, and we might not ever get that for them here today. And nothing that we say or do here today is gonna rectify that or heal that. But we need to try to do what we can here as a committee to move forward. And I don't know if you know, but I can't speak on behalf of my committee members. I've been receiving what feels like hundreds of emails trying to what feels like lobby or influence a licensing decision that wasn't posted or listed as part of the discussion here today. And so emails that include some pictures of some of the disaster and some of the devastation from the flooding and the aftermath. And I'm going, how did these individuals get these photos, for one? And my second question is, and I hope the answer is no, but is Camp Mystic in any way involved in what feels like this coordinated campaign to influence this committee to issue licensure to Camp Mystic?
No, ma'am, absolutely not.
Because we're receiving these emails before what we received is notice of an emergency plan deficiency letter, which indicates some 22 this was as recently as last week, some 22 violations, one being the audit category flash flood warning evacuation plan, and the state notified that you received a mark of insufficient. The note being the plan does not fully address all required evacuation elements within the flood and flash flood response section. And so my question is, once Mystic received this notice of emergency deficiency plan letter, did the 800 applicants who have now applied to go back to Camp Mystic, did they receive notice of this audit deficiency?
No, not to my knowledge, no, ma'am.
I don't think we gave them specifics, but I think we notified our families that we got a deficiency and that we're working on making the corrections. And you definitely bringing up very good points about our application and that we had deficiencies. I'm sure many of y'all have learned as well that the agency's looking at everything very carefully, and under a microscope, and you may have discovered that the 360 plus Texas camps that are applying for renewal license, I think over 300 have received deficiencies. I think they're just being very, very careful, but we're going to make sure we make those corrections.
And so one of our questions yesterday was what type of mass text or mass information protocols did you have in place to notify the families at the time? I understand there was none. Is that correct?
We didn't have a mass notification system, no, ma'am.
Okay, but now moving forward, is that something that you have already fixed or are going to?
I can't speak to that for what Britt has done at Cypress Lake, but
Because it feels like the barrage of emails or coordinated campaign that we're receiving, these families, it seems like they're not aware of this emergency plan deficiency letter. And I just want the public to know that there's no amount of coordinated political pressure or campaign that is going to influence or stop this committee from doing what we have to do to protect these children and these families.
No, ma'am.
That being said, I want to go back over a little bit of what Senator Menendez was going over. I'm trying to imagine in my head how excited and enthused everyone must have felt on July 2nd when they're arriving to camp, some of them for their first time. They're thrilled. And then the administrators, y'all have to go through what feels like probably, the nitty-gritty. I need to meet with the health inspector. I need to meet with the Department of Health and Safety. Is that about right?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
I'm sure there was a lot of excitement going on July 2nd. Everybody's arriving to camp for their first time. Children are being dropped off. But the administrators need to do, we need to dot our I's and cross our T's. And part of that is meeting with DISHES, the Department of Health and Safety, correct?
Yes, correct.
And I see, we have it printed out as some 16, 20 pages of what appear to be, we keep talking about checkboxes, checkboxes of information, correct?
Yes, I believe those questions were on her laptop. That I never get to see the full list.
And
of
the
her
individual
questions.
sent out to inspect was Marisela Samaripa, correct?
Yes, correct.
You don't pick them. You don't know who's coming.
No, we don't.
Okay, but you knew they were coming on July 2nd, correct?
Yes, they did. They asked to come the week before, and it was in between sessions. And I said, they usually want to come out while we're doing activities and everything. So I said it would be better if you came while we had campers here.
Okay, and on this, I'm looking at what's titled a mobile inspection report, and I was imagining her there with her iPad, but you're saying she was there with a laptop?
It was like a tablet. Yes, ma'am.
A tablet. So there was nothing impeding her from moving around or checking out what she needed to check out, correct?
No, there wasn't.
And I guess, Edward, why were you the one meeting with Ms. Samaripa from DISHES?
I've met with her. I've met with the inspector since it used to be our brother James who used to do it, but I usually am there might have been one time where I wasn't at camp where Britt probably met with them, but I usually meet with them because I have a lot of the paperwork they need.
Right, but and in particular, it's not just you'd agree with me. This mobile inspection report isn't just. It doesn't just end with check boxes. At one point at the end, someone signs off.
Correct.
Do you recall signing off on the mobile inspection report? Is this your e-signature under Edward Eastland, owner-operator manager?
I believe that she had me sign her tablet, yes.
Did you do it with your finger?
I think it was my finger.
Okay. And why do you sign off on this mobile inspection report in the capacity of owner-operator manager?
It's just one of my duties. I believe it was just easier to be consistent.
And along with your duties, are you not signing off because you are verifying to the Department of Health and Safety that this information that you've signed off on is true and correct?
Yes.
Okay. You're not doing it under oath, though, right? I didn't read here that you're signing it under penalty of perjury or...
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Are you signing this document on her laptop under penalty of perjury or under oath of any sort?
I don't know.
And I don't think you did.
Yeah.
I looked anywhere to see if there was any sort of verification that what you were signing was true and correct, and there isn't on this document. And that's maybe something that we can change in the future. But for right now, we're taking your unverified signature that this information is true and correct. Is that correct?
Correct.
So other than your signature and your affirmation that this information in this document is true and correct, what else was Marisela Samaripa supposed to do to verify that this document, that all the yeses in these check boxes are true and correct?
I'm sorry, what else was she supposed to do?
What else is the state, the agent that's there on behalf of the state, supposed to do to verify that everything that you've signed off on these check boxes are true and correct, other than take your word for it?
Oh, she went around camp with us. She also had me produce a lot of paperwork. And we went to the kitchen.
So you're saying she exercised due diligence. You didn't stop her and say, only stay in this room?
Oh, absolutely not.
All right, you let her walk around, you let her move around. And how long did this mobile inspection take?
It was several hours.
She wasn't rushing you?
No.
Okay. She wanted to make sure that she got the answers in this. As a matter, who gives her the answers to these check boxes?
We all do. I think with regards to what duties we have, like Mary Liz would help with the medical forms and questions, and Richard with the kitchen.
Right, and they're both identified on this document, but you're the only one that signs it. Is there a reason that they didn't sign off on it?
No, I don't know that reason.
For example, one of the questions are playgrounds and equipment used by campers in compliance with CPSC guidelines? And the answer is yes. Just, again, who tells her how to fill out whether to answer yes or no?
I don't ever remember being asked about playground equipment. We don't usually.
Right. There's over 100 checkbox questions
Right.
in here. You'd agree with me, and you don't remember all of them?
No, I don't.
That's fair. But in particular, and I know Senator Menendez started going over this, one of the checkbox questions, one of the 100 of them is there a written plan of procedures to be implemented in case of a disaster? And the checkbox answer says yes. So I'm asking here on July 2nd of 2025, what was that written plan of procedures implemented in case of a disaster?
It was in a binder right next to where she was. It's a bookshelf in my office.
And you showed it to her?
I believe she picked it up when I showed her where it was.
And Marisela read it, and she looked at it, she took her time with it?
I think so. I don't remember how long she had it.
So you led her to believe that there was, in fact, a plan to be implemented in the case of a disaster?
She asked where my emergency procedures plans were.
And you showed them to her?
Yes.
And so I guess my question is, as a state agency, what else is she supposed to do other than take your word for it, that there is, in fact, a plan to be implemented in case of a disaster?
What else? I'm sorry.
If we're trying to stop this from happening in the future, the state can only do so much, right? We're not making you swear to this. We're not making you do this under perjury. What else is the state supposed to do other than take your word for it that there was a plan to be implemented?
I'm sorry. I'm having trouble with that question.
Representative Gamis, I think you're referring to the posted, written, one-page emergency plans that we had in all the cabins.
Right.
Is that
It's
right?
Representative Gamis. And I'm asking, moving forward, what do you recommend that the state do to verify that your plan is in fact going to be implemented in the future? Because we took your word for it in 2025.
Yes, thank you, Representative Gomez. We know that this is a huge sticking point, our written evacuation plan and written emergency plan that we complied with DSHS, that we had in our cabins. It's worked for a couple decades at the very least, that no one told us from dishes to change, no experts, no engineers, no one recommended that this needed to be changed. But we appreciate the new legislation based on what this river, now that everybody knows, can do. That obviously didn't work on July 25th, but we believe based on everything that was provided, that all the historical data, everybody that recommended things for us to do, that in the 100 years of Camp Mystic, that it worked then. But we agree with you now that it needs to be changed, and that's why we have a 60-page plus emergency evacuation plan, just like I think other camps are doing now.
Thank you. Your second checkbox question here states, are all camp staff and volunteers made aware of the plan of emergency to be implemented during the staff training program? When did the staff training program take place?
It takes place when they arrive that night. We go over emergency procedures.
On July 2nd?
No, the counselors arrive before the campers on July
1st.
June. 27th. We actually started camp June 29th, I believe.
How long did that training last?
It's a day and a half of training.
What were these camp volunteers or counselors trained on in regards to the event of a flooding disaster prior to July 2nd?
We talk about staying in your cabins because we believe they were on safe high ground and that we would instruct them otherwise if needed.
And this is really, really hard for me because I want, and I know everyone on the dais wants to understand why there weren't 3 counselors versus 2, and the issue of student ratio, camper ratio is a huge issue, but it sounds like based, irrespective of if there were 3 or 2 young women in those cabins that night, it sounds like even if there was 3, we would have just had 1 more young lady standing in water waiting to be told what to do, irrespective of the ratio. And so my question that night is, and we've established that clearly there's no doubt in anyone's mind that the loudspeaker was working. Even when the first evacuation attempt took place, and I'm so glad that y'all moved even then, when the first evacuation attempt took place, and we have 3 men getting in their cars trying to single-handedly escort these young ladies out, why didn't someone get on the loudspeaker then and say, all hands on deck, we've hit an iceberg?
Again, I've been through the scenario many, many times, and all of these arguments I've thought about. I've thought about all the things we could have done, and again, at that moment, I was trying to get to the next cabin every trip. I agree that there are some things that y'all suggest, and using the PA, I don't know. I don't know what would have happened. It depended on what time it was.
And there's no doubt that according to the investigation that you were bending over backwards trying to make this work. But there's still a lot of unanswered questions about what I think they said 9 adults were doing up close to uptight. Why did we not activate the 9 adults that were in higher ground and uptight? We walked that area. You can see from uptight down the road. If I just peer over, I can see what's going on. We saw the videos. You can hear, there's thunder and lightning, but you can hear little girls screaming for help. So even if all the adults on the hill didn't have cell phones or weren't texting or weren't calling, you could see and hear what was going on. What were the adults on uptight doing other than watching? And maybe that's some of the questions that we'll never have answered. Were those adults not part of the emergency training and volunteer staff training that took place prior to July 2nd that you're telling the public happened?
They weren't a part of my training. I trained the counselors, so.
Moving forward, are any of them, is everyone who's part of Camp Mystic or of your operation going to be a part of this training and going to be told that they have agency and free will and the ability to take action if need be?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Representative Gomez. You covered a bunch of covered a bunch of my questions, and this is hard on y'all. But I represent a little girl from Belleville, Texas, and so these are not personal. But it's a very personal tragedy to all these parents out here. So I ask these questions for a little girl from Belleville who's never going to grow up, never going to laugh, play with her sister again, never get married. I know y'all accept that. You've been working through that. Edward, you apologized in your opening statements. I think these parents have been waiting for that for a long time. And if we could go play this over again, there'd be so many things we'd do differently. And that's what I'm hearing you say. The number one thing I want y'all to say. They just want answers. Dang. I want to hear, Mary Liz, I saw a quote in the New York Times where you say, they just don't know how sorry we are.
Yeah.
Was your quote?
We're so sorry. Every day, every minute of every day, we're so sorry.
Dang. Man, I walked out of here yesterday. And for the first time, I think I left a hearing and I said, there's just losers everywhere. Losers. And we can't win, can't back up time. But what we can do is get better for the future. And that's just kind of where a mom that is feeling the pain, nothing, I can never feel y'all's pain enough, nor can I live or walk in your shoes. But the one thing that I think we can all do is we can say, as I said in the camera yesterday, to every camp owner, anyone that cares for children, my gosh, learn from this. Learn from this. So I'm going to hit on a few high points here in your notebooks. Ms. Garrett, your presentation yesterday, Senator, you hit on this. It says in the notebook, floods, stay in your cabin, 2 exclamation points. B, you will be informed on proper procedures over a PA system. And C, when in doubt, get help. One of the things that I think was most disturbing is knowing that your father knew that river so well, and 4 inches does make a difference. We all know that area if you're a Texan, many generations. When the 2 counselors came from Bug In and Look In, they were seeking help, weren't they?
They were. Yes, they were.
So they were following that. And y'all took them back down to their cabin.
Well, when we took them back down, I think that was, early on there was a lot of talk that we told girls to stay in their cabins as the floodwaters were coming up, but that wasn't the case. Whenever we went back to the cabin, it was a drainage issue with the water going under their doorway, and it was very early on. The water was not even close to their cabin from the river.
That was at 2:37. And here's the thing, I tried to think through this when we walked over there and we stood on that walkway right between Bug Hut and
Look In.
Look In, Bug House and Look In. I tried to make it analogous to maybe a pipe bursting in a ceiling. And would you tell someone to just go get some towels and wipe it up?
They had already put down towels when we got there. It was a little semicircle around the door, and it was getting the counselors' belongings wet. The counselors have beds closest to the door.
And again, I'm pointing these things out not to bring more misery to y'all, but we've got to make sense of this, and everyone has got to listen, that we just have to be better. From 114, and I have to go to this slide, and I believe it was slide 42 yesterday. 42. And Richard, I think that you read from this, Mr. Richard in Eastland, you read from this, but you stopped at, is going to, flash flood is, it goes through until 4:15 a.m. I won't read, between 1 and 2 inches of rain have fallen. The expected rainfall is 2 to 3 inches, and you go on. But the next line right there is, it says, hazard, life-threatening flash flooding, thunderstorms producing flash flooding, source, radar, impact, life-threatening flash flooding of creeks and streams, urban areas, highways, streets, and underpasses. Some locations that will experience flash flooding include Kerrville, Ingram, Hunt, Waltonia, Kerr Wildlife Management Area, and Los Naples State Natural Area. I mean, and I will just say life-threatening flash flooding, and that's at 114. So we could walk through all these things, and my gosh, I want y'all to know that last night I prayed for y'all, and I'm going to pray for y'all every day forward, because I can't imagine what you went through. But from 1:14 until, I think, Mr. Dick England at 3:51 when he was submerged, the timeline from Judge Massengale and Ms. Garrett from on the third attempt, 3:24 to 3:40 a.m., we were minutes away from saving everyone. Would you agree?
We were very close.
And I think what's most crushing is that some of the girls that I think you told to walk, I just don't know at what time or what moment didn't you say to everybody, let's walk. Everybody walk, run, run. The sibling walking by, can I get my sister? I just had to put that in perspective. And we all have to live with this. Did we have the right rules? But the thing is that at one point, and I talked to all the camp directors out there, common sense, and I know you were fighting for this, but I have to point this out. It is so painful, and we are seeking the truth here. We are seeking the truth. I need to clarify something. On that same slide 42, it said, code red called Edward Eastland's phone. He also received the text alert and read the text at 1:51 a.m. True or false?
At 1:51, that was the first I'd heard that she had a red time. But that makes sense because I got up at 1:45 and I probably saw it then. I didn't remember seeing it until the next day.
Okay. Just to follow up on the counselors and Senator Hughes and Senator Menendez, you drilled down on this. It seemed, and one of the parents reached out to me, it seemed though, getting counselors was difficult. I want to say, and I think, Mrs. Eastland, that you said, these are terrific people. My gosh, without their action, do y'all agree? Without their action, passing people out of windows in the two cabins. I think that was
Chatterbox in that hut. Mm-hmm.
Without those heroic actions, like my staffer and I, when we left your camp last Monday, we were silent for so long, and we broke the silence with, it could have been 100 children lost. Could have been 127. Mm-hmm. So not critical of the counselors at all. But how much advance time do you hire them on? Like, especially for that particular session?
It varies. It varies.
Do you remember, Mrs. Eastland, on that particular term that started on June 27th? You remember when y'all finally had a full, and some argue that we didn't have enough counselors, 3 in the cabin. Do you remember when you did your last hiring at that term?
I don't remember, but I've heard that 3 days before from yesterday that I hired somebody, which doesn't sound unreasonable, and probably happened.
3 days before the camp began.
Mm-hmm. The conversation I had with the counselor that wanted her to come, I actually said, no, that's okay, we don't need her, because I only had 2 brand-new counselors that term, is how popular the term was. And she said, oh, but we all know her, we'd love to have her. And I said, okay, have her apply. And she went through the application process.
That's something we need to consider and work through, is those last-minute hires that we entrust. And I mean, I'm talking about policy-wise that I think we all need to wrestle with. And I think we're all coming up with good ideas here, but I don't know if that's a good thing when these girls are going to be in charge of, babies, 8-year-olds. I want to go to, I want to read to you Texas Administrative Code, Section 265.15E. This has been in code for a long time. Under medical and nursing care in Subchapter B, Texas Youth Camp Safety and Health of Chapter 265, which is general sanitation, states, camper death or confirmed cases of waterborne or foodborne diseases such as, and it goes through, it's cholera, dysentery, typhoid, salmonella, several things, shall be reported to the Department of State Health Services Standards and Quality Unit within 24 hours of occurrence in the case of disease. Also talks about death. I think, Mrs. Eastland, you testified during the court case, and I've got the script here, that have you reported the 27 deaths to the Department of State Health Services that is required by code?
No, ma'am, I have not. And I testified to that as well, yes.
You did. You did. I actually was watching that live.
Yeah.
So I have the blessing, but also the responsibility of chairing Health and Human Services in the Texas Senate. And I just can't get there. Why wouldn't you follow the statute? Even like, I get within 24 hours, the words yesterday used in the report, mayhem. We were urged by the investigators to look at the aftermath and how we handle disasters. I'm not asking for the 24 hours. I'm asking for 10 months later. Why?
I can understand your question for sure. I just haven't done it because it's also not only my responsibility. I would say that the camp hasn't reported them either. And I think everyone knows at this point.
But it's required by law. And I would just say this. I know people that have sent their children to your camp, aside from these that are grieving out here. And I know that you are, Christian, good people. It's how you've been described to me. One of my friends described Dick Eastland as a father, second father to her. And I have to ask y'all this. That's required by law before we pass Senate Bill 1 of the special session, which we're going to need follow-up bills to that. But the basic statutes that were in law already, we've seen the deficiencies, as Ms. Gomez, Representative Gomez had pointed out. And as we wrestle with this, and then your 22 deficiencies. I mean, guys, 22 deficiencies. I'm dealing with camps, quite honestly, Senator Perry, that the only deficiency they're dealing with is the landline that we required in SB 1 because AT&T and other providers can't get it to them on time. So 22 deficiencies plus the code that I just quoted. And I for sure thought, Mrs. Eastland, that today, after, this is the transcript, that you were going to answer me and say, yes, ma'am, I reported those last week. The culture that was described to us, and I wrote those down, about Mr. Eastland, a man who's been so long revered, this shouldn't be his legacy. But a culture that led us to some decisions. And quite honestly, as someone who works on these statutes in the area that I chair, I see that as such a large deficiency and such a defiance of the code that I would ask each of you, and Mrs. Eastland, you said, and I'm not sure if I heard it, that if it's the will of the people that y'all not open the camp, we're talking May 30th. This is April 28th. You have 22 deficiencies. You haven't reported the 27 deaths that are required by law. And I say this with love and kindness. You both admitted, I think all four of you, and I'm so glad you're getting therapy. I think that is the right step. Cannot imagine what you're going through. But in light of everything that I've just pointed out, Do you really think you're ready to take on 500 children plus? And I'm not fussing at you. I am here with my colleagues that write the laws that, as we say, the license is a privilege to have. We set a standard. In some of our daycares, and in some of the codes that, in the health and safety codes, if they have one death, we take their license away. Residential treatment centers, daycares, I mean, we shut them down. We shut them down. We've been under federal lawsuit for years. Things that happen in residential treatment centers. These are children too. And so I would implore y'all to think through this as you hear these families today. And I don't want any more pain on you, but we have to work through what they're going through. Thank you for your apologies today. We have to learn from this. Mrs. Eastland, report the 27 deaths. Adhere to the law. Please adhere to the law, because why else would we write these laws? There's a reason to have laws. There's a reason that SB 1 is out there. There's a reason that you've been delivered a letter of 20, what mine says, 22 deficiencies. Quite honestly, I'm going to read a couple of these on these deficiencies. I was so shocked by it. Flash flood warning evacuation plan, parent notification of flood plan, natural disaster plan, camper safety training, floodplain location map, designated emergency preparedness coordinator, fire plan, severe injury, severe illness, death plan, aquatic emergency plan, amongst other deficiencies. And when I say this, guys, y'all are going through so much. Y'all are going through so much. Think this through. Are you ready to take on 500 plus children with 22 deficiencies and something so glaring as you have not reported the 27 deaths that are required by law?
Thank you, Senator. We, like I said earlier, the last thing we want to do is create any more pain for these wonderful families that are grieving. But we just know we just know that, as I said earlier, that as the facts continue to come out, we just pray that people will understand that we did everything we could in this unimaginable flood, and we were ready based on everything that experts, government officials were telling us to do, and what we believe based on almost 100 years of history. And we believe that through time we pray that we can reconcile with these wonderful families. And we believe if we do it right, a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, they will be glad that we had camp this summer. I know right now it doesn't seem that way, but I really believe that. And we just pray through time. And we are ready, Senator. We've talked to hundreds of families, and Katie and I are going to be the directors along with any of my family. And we just, as we said, we're making those corrections, and they will be submitted today or tomorrow.
There, in that report yesterday, and Ms. Garrett, you said that the deficiencies weren't just at Camp Mystic. I think we had testimony to that, Senator Perry. Ms. Garrett also said something about remembering in 1987, I think we were both in college. How many times do we have to make this mistake to not keep our children safe? But implore on y'all, you're Christian good people. I think that's true. May the 30th. This is in October. This is April 28th. I'm going to keep praying for y'all, because I know you're good people. Mrs. Eastland, report those 27 deaths. Don't be above the law. Please. Please. I'm begging you.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Dyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Eastlands, I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for providing our investigators unfettered access, I believe was the quote yesterday from Ms. Garrett. Of course, this is a very emotional testimony, but we have to drill down and make sure that we do get the facts. And I know we've visited a couple of times today, but I want to drill down on it a little bit more. And I want to start out by simply asking, did y'all have an evacuation plan? Yes or no?
Yes, we did. It was posted in every cabin, but we also agree that it didn't work this time.
What was that evacuation plan?
As y'all know, the law required, I think it's section 265.15, section K, that we have written emergency plans that include being prepared and instructions to our campers and counselors for situations that include disasters, loss of life, I think illnesses, and serious accidents. And if you look at it again, the top part mentions serious accidents, which could include, we have a horseback program, which includes what to do in case you fall off a horse, what people should do. The next thing was in regards to tornadoes, which was a very specific evacuation plan. For fire was evacuation plan for fire to go the flats, go to the flagpole, and Senior Hill, go to the golf box. There was a very specific evacuation plan. The next situation, tornadoes, which is stay in place, which is, again, what experts have told us you're supposed to do in a tornado. The bottom dealt with serious illnesses, what you're supposed to do, reporting it to the nurses if someone's sick. So the last plan I know that is the sticking point is mentioning of the floods. And we hope through time everyone understands the reason that was in there was not required because none of our cabins were in the floodplain. But my dad was so nervous about girls being curious of going near the water during a flood, it was to stay away from that. And so it does mention even that I know this is going to be a fact issue at trial, but we had an evacuation plan that wasn't required because we were not in the floodplain. But it said, stay in your cabin, stay in place until notified by the office. And that's what we did that's what we did on July 4th. And we know it didn't work. And we hope through time people understand the magnitude of this flood. But one last thing I'd mention, Representative Dyson, is the video that was shown to y'all. I appreciate that by Ms. Garrett. I wish y'all would watch the whole video because about the danger of a flash flood in our area, but it also mentions about stay in place and turn around, don't drown.
If I might, Mr. Dyson, I hate to interrupt. I'm sorry, I just got to, just because you're on topic. How is that an evacuation plan to stay there? Tell me how that's evacuating anyone to stay there. The evacuation plan is counselors get up, put them in a line, get them out. So please explain to me how telling someone to stay somewhere is an evacuation plan. That seems like the antithesis of an evacuation plan. Sorry, Mr. Dyson.
Answer. It's a very good question, sir. The evacuation plan is until we tell you otherwise. That is, or tell you what to do. And I understand that it did not work here. I get it. I understand it. But
Right, but explain to me how that's a plan to evacuate. Like, I can't understand. Just using the word evacuation plan leads me to believe I'm going somewhere. That can't be a plan to evacuate. Can we at least meet there?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I think that y'all have talked about how you said that my father had this plan in his brain and something that he had done in '87 and '78. The plan. I just want to say this: that his biggest fear when it came to floods was the girls would be curious about them. because floods are interesting and we feel safe around water. It's different from like looking over a cliff. And he was terrified about people wandering down when we're having a flood event, because some of these flood events do happen for several days. And so to him, it was important to hammer home to people to stay in your cabins with your counselors, because he was so afraid of kids wandering off until told otherwise.
But if they had a plan in place.
Yes, absolutely.
And as we discussed, as the investigator said, this camp is built on obedience and following the rules and so forth and so on. So if the plan was in place to evacuate, they wouldn't be wandering by the river. They would be evacuating with their camp counselors in an orderly fashion. And that's why the stay in place is not an evacuation plan.
What my father was worried about was the chaos that Miss Garrett talked about with Nut Hut and Chatterbox. He was worried about that kind
Right, but
of
when you
confusion.
agree, if they had a plan, there wouldn't be the chaos. There was the chaos because there was no plan.
With those, I'm just talking about general.
Understood. I understood. You're talking about those two cabins. My point to you is this: there wouldn't have been the chaos if there was an evacuation plan. Can you agree with me on that?
I would say yes and no, sir. I don't know. I don't know if. I think what he was afraid of was that campers and counselors would self-evacuate into a dangerous situation. Does that make sense?
Not really, because that's why they have a plan. And so if the plan is
Yes, sir.
organized and orderly, and that's why in this situation, the planned shelter in place clearly did not work. And they were obedient to it to a
Yes, sir.
fault, to where these cabins filled with water and they weren't going anywhere. And so that's why having an evacuation plan is so important. And these girls listened to y'all. They listened to their counselors. And if there was an evacuation plan, you wouldn't have lost any girls. That's just the reality of the situation, and I appreciate the tough spot you guys are in, and I appreciate y'all being here, but there's also appreciation of facts, and it's an acknowledgement of what actually happened. And so that is my point. I will have time to ask y'all questions. I apologize, Mr. Dyson. Please continue with your line of questioning.
That's all right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you took a couple of those questions. But I do want to expand a little bit, because we talked about, there's a lot of camps in that area. And my understanding is that the camp community around there is pretty small. And that y'all probably know most of the operators, owners that are in that area. Did y'all ever have any discussions with any of them about flood evacuation plans over these years?
I'm not sure specifically about flood evacuation plans. We do have a yearly meeting with Texas camps where we go over general things like counselor recruitment or things, but also we talk about safety and ways to improve safety. The health department usually comes, talks to us about the things they're focusing on, in specific years, things we need to work on. But I do not recall anything specifically about floods. I will say that after the 2015 Memorial Day floods, I'm sure that had been a subject, and it was probably talked amongst the camps. But I do not have the personal, I might not have been there that year.
Thank you, Representative Dyson. I do know that after the 1987 tragedy, where a camp tried to evacuate the property by bus and 10 children died, I know there was much discussion amongst camp communities to never do that again, to not try to evacuate over low water crossings.
Yeah. And I know I'm revisiting this, but I just want to know, when it comes to specific on flooding events, what was the plan? Was there some type of metric that you're looking for? And whether it be your father that was looking for that, what was the plan? Not whether it was written or not, but did y'all have a specific plan?
His plan was to move the girls to our recreational hall from those cabins.
At a certain metric, at a certain time? When we're talking about a flooding event happening, whether, not just talking about specifically July 4th, and not just talking about that night,
yes, sir,
but going in there. Because my belief is plans can fail, but planning is what prepares you. And so I just want to know, going into this camp session, what was the plan if a flood were to happen? Do any of y'all know what that plan was going into it?
Like the threshold, the trigger point, the red button. That you all
Well,
talked
yeah,
about.
and
Yes.
to me, a plan would have a threshold and then an operation part to it that you move. And when all of this is triggered, yes, so that threshold would be part of that plan.
I do not know what his threshold or what his trigger point was when he started. We talked about how Francis's call was very much a main part of that. But as Ms. Garrett said, he was also out on the camp, looking out at the river, looking and determining whether the kids were still safe in the cabin or whether to move them to rec hall.
Okay. Mr. Edward Eastland, sorry, just to try and make the record. And I might just go with y'all's first names to make it a little bit more clear on the record.
That's fine.
But going back to what Representative Gomez was asking you about and about this inspection report, where you're asked all these different questions, and we visited, one was asking about the written plan of procedures to be implemented in case of disaster, and it goes on. It somewhat parrots the statute, but what I noticed is missing out of there, it does not specifically ask about evacuation plan, right? Did anyone ever ask y'all about what your specific evacuation plan was for flooding?
I don't believe they asked that directly, but they always check the emergency procedures book.
Okay, and if they checked your book, but if you were to be asked that question, how would you have answered that question, since you're the one providing the information to dishes?
How would I answer that? I would show them the plan, and if they told me it wasn't sufficient, I would have changed it.
Okay, and this is a plan that y'all submitted with your permit, or only when you had to, how does that work on permitting? Is that something that you have to do annually? Or?
I don't think it's a part of the license application,
Okay.
no.
Okay. All right. Did y'all ever have talk with any county officials about emergency planning or preparation for floods?
The local, this is Britt Eastland for the record, the local safety coordinator, Dub Thomas, I think at various times tried to get the camps together to talk about things like that, emergency situations, but I don't recall it being, it had been some time.
Okay, so is it safe to say in the area there was not an overall plan about when an evacuation maybe needed to happen down by the river for these youth camps?
You mean evacuating our property? Or
just even evacuating down by the river or flooding at a certain level, any warnings or anything like that locally from any emergency planning officials?
I don't recall, Representative.
Okay. And I think we hit on that y'all didn't really ever, the camps never really got together to discuss this issue or kind of what best practices would be along the Guadalupe or just in that general area.
Just like I mentioned, Representative, that the best practice was to stay in place, what we were trained by FEMA and many officials. And yeah, so no coordination. I think most camps are like Mystic. We're not in a floodplain, but obviously now we're appreciative of the new legislation that requires an evacuation plan for flooding, even when you're above the floodplain. And so many camps are working very hard on that in their application.
Okay. That's all the questions I have, Mr. Chair.
Senator Perry.
Thank you. Britt, I believe. It's your position that none of those cabins that had loss of life are in the floodplain.
That's correct, Senator. Bughouse and Hangover, their foundation, which is several feet down below the floor, there's like maybe 2 feet of Bughouse in the floodplain, but the floor is like 8 feet above that. It's above the floodplain.
So are you aware that FEMA updated the flood maps in the Guadalupe Basin in 2011?
Yes, I believe so.
All of the relevant cabins, including Bubble Inn, Twins 1 and 2, were then located within a floodplain, with exception to also Twins 1 and 2 were also in the floodway. Your dad had extensive knowledge. That is undeniable. His time on UGBRA, as dysfunctional as that River Authority was, to the point that we saw fit to put them under sunset. That bill didn't pass. So I would not qualify them as legit, but I would say your dad on that board was an asset. In 2013, the Eastlands were able to carve out of the floodway and the floodplain through a process, through FEMA, for Camp Mystic to pull those cabins out. So I want to be really clear. We're playing semantics here. You've been extremely consistent in setting the stage for the court. And I find that offensive at some level, personally. Now, I know it's your job to defend your livelihood, defend this. Every time you say, I kind of ask the question broadly, I'm going to ask it when I finish here real quickly. Do you think you deserve another bite at the apple? I would argue the deficiencies alone, if we're objective, everybody can make 100 on a test when they have the answers. Y'all didn't even make it through to passing on the second round. So I don't even understand how you could legitimately even think you're responsible enough to be in it. But I want to squelch this floodplain conversation because whether it is or isn't, I guess you've got a lot of hydrologists paying a lot of money to figure out whether they're going to say it is or isn't. But at one point, it was in there to the point that FEMA said it was, and then there's a carve-out, and those are no longer allowed at state level now. My bill prohibits carve-outs and waivers. And I would assume, knowing this culture and this industry, that a lot of politics was applied to get some of those. But it's disingenuous, extremely disingenuous, to play on the lack of knowledge, because this is not subject matter expertise a lot of people have, to say it's not in the floodplain and floodway. Just to kind of let that fly over as if y'all just don't understand our cabins were safe. That's a very nuanced answer that plays to the whole culture thing, that plays to how you can pull an application from prior stuff after the events that have transpired. This is all lining up to be, I said it earlier, I don't know if it's incompetence or arrogance, but y'all seem to have, as a family unit, this idea that we are above, I like the word, disregard for what we think is good for the state as a whole. And the fact that you got parents that were not privy to this process the last 2 days saying we want to come back, and if they still do, that's their call. But if that's your benchmark for you're qualified, that makes no sense to me. But this floodplain floodway conversation is important. It's very detailed. It's very in the weeds. And for you to lay it out there like we didn't have that problem is just disingenuous, because your dad got them carved out. Whether they should have been in or should have been out, there was a deliberate effort to pull them out. I would assume, partly because you wanted to fill the cabins, I would assume insurance was getting to a point where it was hard to have that question. Do y'all have insurance, by the way, for liability for the event that's currently transpiring? I assume civil down the road. Do y'all have insurance to cover that?
For this year?
No, for not your civil process. Do you have a civil insurance policy?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm frustrated, and we've been all over this, and I'm not going to do it. A PA system, as important as it was, would have been worthless if you had not trained the counselors in the cabins on what to do. So we can keep going around this circle, and we can keep chasing this tail. Y'all were not ready to handle kids. And I would tell you, the patriarch of the group has done you a tremendous disservice by example and by history and by instilling a fear, I believe, Dad's always right, never question. And it manifested itself into 27 lives lost. And I would agree 100% with Chair Myers. An evacuation plan, by definition, means you move. And that's a Captain Obvious moment for anybody that's paying attention. But I will not let you take this floodplain conversation to a level where it's not relevant because it's not one of the cabin's issues, when by some little political tweak, it pulled it out. And if it isn't in there, it's by fractions. And the idea that the river's never been here before, it happened in 32, not to this level and this height, but it had the same effect. It washed the cabins away. So you don't get the rest on that one either. I'm just floored, honestly. Not specifically to any one of y'all other than you, sir, seem to be setting up the defense, the constant. So my question to all four, and if you don't want to answer it, I respect this. Do you feel like you have the right to ask the state to grant you another bite at the apple with all that's transpired the last year? Edward?
Can you rephrase
Do you
that?
believe that, let me ask it this way. If, and I don't know where Dishes is at on this, but if they were to find you deficient and not issue a license, are y'all going to aggressively pursue the time frame and the appeals process for the next year and put everybody back through this process today? Will you trust the state?
If we don't have a license, we're not having camp.
There's an appeal process.
We understand that.
And there's a process that takes 45 days. And so you can literally bleed this out to where this camp season is passed. And under the current rules, you get to kind of operate until this is resolved.
We understand that, Senator, and we will not have camp if we don't have a license.
You will not appeal the state's findings.
We'll probably appeal it,
Okay.
but we will not have camp.
You're mixing words again.
We
you
won't
will
have
not
camp.
open Cypress.
We will
if
not
you-
open Cypress if we do not have a license.
Okay. Thank you.
Senator, yeah, we plan to correct all the deficiencies, so I think by law, we should be able to get a license.
If you're able to correct these deficiencies and get a license, just as I said very early on, whatever allows that to happen will be different after next session. So as a finance model, if I have my way, only figure this as a one shot.
Chair, recognize Speaker Moody.
Thank you, Chairman Meyer. I just want to be very clear, and obviously you all have counsel in this process, so I'll echo this as a lawyer. If there's something you don't want to answer, you don't have to answer it. But it seemed clear to me what you said was intention to clarify any deficiencies that have been submitted to you within the next couple of days is what I think I heard testified to. If license isn't granted, while you may appeal and avail yourself of the appeal system, the decision that y'all have made as operators is to not operate in 2026 until that appeal is handled. Is that what I'm hearing? I just want to make sure that's very clear.
That is correct.
Okay.
Representative Moody, I believe we are going to talk as a family because I believe there's some kind of misunderstanding. All camps that have applied for renewal do have a valid license, and so I believe that it'll be a family decision. We can't say anything on the record that what we'll do in that aspect.
Okay, understood. I just want to make sure what I was hearing and wanted to give the opportunity to clarify, just because I think that's something that people are interested in hearing. I do want to go back to, and I don't want to belabor this point when we're talking about evacuations, and I think we've gotten to an agreement that the shelter in place is not an evacuation. And as Ms. Garrett said yesterday, shelter in place works until it doesn't, right? And there's a trigger point for that decision-making process. How much time, and again, Edward, you talked about reliving this over and over and over again. I'm sure you figured out those minutes in your mind too. But when we read through those 3 bullets on a flood evacuation, stay in place, as we agree, that's not really an evacuation. Then the second point is, we'll tell you what to do. So I think, Richard, it may have been you that said the plan that my dad had was evacuate to rec hall, right? That was, okay. Was that a plan that was, it's clearly it's not on paper, right? It just says, wait till you hear from us. Was anybody trained at a point to say, when you hear the word evacuate, it means one counselor in front, one counselor behind, depending on however are in there, and it means walk to whatever safe site it is. Was that ever conveyed to anybody in training?
No, sir.
So, no. So I guess, and that's the part that I think that's going to trouble folks is there was discipline, there was obedience, and I think people were going to stay put and did stay put. And had that plan, even if it wasn't on paper, had been conveyed to folks, when you hear the word evacuate, it means X, Y, Z. Then I think the instructions become a lot easier because you follow the plan that's in place. And it's not for us to say whether the plan would have worked to perfection or not. Some plans do and some plans don't, but a plan is something that people can follow and more often than not, it can lead to a safer situation. And it leads me to talk about what Senator Colcourse was mentioning, because I think there's a verbal instruction, Edward, I think from you to the campers in Jumble to walk to Rec Hall. Is that, do I have that correct?
Yes, sir. So I had a.
You were going.
I was in my truck with a full truck from the previous cabin before Jumble House.
Coming back up.
Yes, I think it was Tumbling One was mostly in my truck.
Okay.
And the counselors were out on the porch, and one of them asked me, "Should we walk?" And I said yes.
So they made an inquiry. You said yes, and then I
Yes,
think
sir.
because we have, I think, a timestamp photo of about 3:26 a.m. of campers from Jumble walking to Rec Hall.
Yes, I
think
believe those were the same campers I told to walk.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
so somewhere between, 3:20, 3:25 or so, that's when you had given that instruction. And I know you said this a couple of times, and I certainly respect the difficulty of these situations. You said, in that moment, I was trying to get to the next cabin, right? We're trying to do what we can. Was that instruction verbally given to anybody else? Because according to the plan, wait for instruction, they got that instruction from you, and they did what they were told. Was there any communication to get that same instruction to anyone else while there were? Because I think in that photo, ankle deep, I think we're looking at ankle deep water. So at that point, you thought it was necessary for them to walk and get away from where they were at.
Yes, that water that was, I believe that was the volleyball court, and is that the picture you're referring to?
Yeah, I think the courts are in the foreground, and
Yes.
the grass field is in the back.
Yes, where they were, it was about ankle deep, but I think that video that one of the Polish workers took was right around the same time, around Twins.
Around Twins. And so traversing different
Yes.
areas, it's going to be, right, varying heights of water. Right? I
Correct.
get all that. But at least at that moment, because I know we talked about lightning and there's other dangers, and right at that moment, though, when faced with that question, the safest thing to tell the folks in the campers in Jumble to do was, yes, get together and walk. And you're doing your best to go back and forth. Is there any communication to get that word to anybody else? If safe, if this, then walk. Because we're probably talking about, right, 20 to 25 more minutes where that would still be an option.
I don't believe that. I think Glenn had told which cabin, Gigglebox, to he gave them instructions on because they couldn't get to Rec Hall at that point.
They couldn't safely traverse that direction,
No.
so then they go up the
Yes, sir.
the hill. Okay. I talked a little bit about the big three yesterday. Who was tasked with, and when were they awakened to help evacuate campers?
I know that Glenn woke, or I don't know if he woke them up. They were probably already awake.
Okay.
But he had talked to the big three.
Okay. And can any one of you address, if you have the information, what the big three did in any successive evacuation once they were awakened?
I don't know. I've seen pictures of them on the porch of Cozy, but I don't know their exact actions that night.
Okay. Did any of you all have information to that effect? No?
No, sir.
No.
Okay. Thank you. And I do want to clarify, we've talked about the PA a lot. It was asked, and I think the investigators, I think, were being as legally precise as they could be. They said, we have no information to the contrary that it wasn't working. We know that the power goes out at a certain point. It's within a certain range of time. If the power's out, it would mean that the PA wouldn't work, right? So whenever that
Correct.
happens, we don't have PA anymore.
Correct.
Okay, so we do know that we can at least say that whatever that band of time is, the PA's out. But we do know if power's on, should be accessible. And I'm not going to get to the point, we've already talked about utilization or not utilization. I just want to get to the point of, was there anybody aware that it was not operational up until power going out?
No, sir. I don't know that.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Members, any follow-up? Any members? Chairman?
Very good. All right. I do have a few questions, one of which has kind of been asked differently, but I want each one of you to answer it for me, and then I'm going to have two follow-ups. Do you disagree with anything that our investigators presented yesterday? And if you please, all four answer. Do you disagree with anything they presented yesterday? I understand you have some opinions about, could be more here, but do you disagree with any of the facts as our investigators laid them out yesterday?
Yes, sir. The two facts about the counselor deficiencies and about the flood warnings themselves.
And can you get more specific for me, please?
I don't feel like the National Weather Service was accurately describing what was happening. And so I have, I can go through it with you, but I feel like we were not.
So when they were providing, hey, flash flood, danger, you could drown, that wasn't an accurate statement. What part of it wasn't accurate?
I would say the level, sir, because the flash flood warnings that do go out throughout the state. A lot of times it's about being in flood-prone areas, right? Like if you go with your family to a national park and you're camping down by the river, you're like, we better get to higher ground, right? I feel like.
But let me ask you.
I'm
sorry, I'm stepping over you. Please.
So the content of them themselves, as well as, all right, so there's flash flood warnings, and then there were flood warnings that went out. So let me just say that the 319 flood warning that went out by National Weather Service, on the scale of the flooding, they said minor flooding is occurring and moderate flooding is forecast. This is 19 minutes into the evacuation. They said the river is expected to rise to a crest of 16 feet this morning. It will fall below that flood stage this afternoon. That Instagram video that Ms. Garrett showed you of the water going over the Cypress Creek, that was October 16th, 2018. That was a flood that had a 19-foot rise. And the time that was taken, it was probably about 6 inches from the peak. So what they were saying at 319 was you're going to get a flood of about that size, a 5-year flood. And then 3:33 a.m., they updated it to a 10-year flood. At 4 a.m., they updated it to a 25-year flood because they were not aware of what was actually happening. Their gauges were not accurately getting it, and the radar was not accurately getting it. So that is what I have the contention about.
Okay, and so that's different than my question, as I heard you explain, but I do appreciate your, my question was, are any of the facts, as they laid them out, not whether you agree with the level of the TDM, did TDM issue the warnings as the investigators laid out? So not whether, you see my point? There's a difference there. Like, as the facts, as they laid them out, do you have any disagreements as they laid them out? That TDM did in fact issue X warning, or TDM did it, you see what I'm saying? So overall in that report, do you have any disagreement with any facts as the investigators laid them out?
No, TDM did issue warnings.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
so do you have any, do you disagree with anything that the investigators laid out just from a factual perspective?
Well, I thought that my answer was that
No,
it was
but
about the factual.
Yeah, but my question is not whether TDM did it accurately or didn't do it accurately. The report as a whole, was it factually accurate? Did, in fact, TDM issue those warnings at the time that the investigators said they did?
They did issue warnings, yes, sir.
Okay, so then my question to you is, to each one of you, as the report as a whole, and I believe all four of you have complimented our investigators, the fantastic, thorough job, just from a factual perspective, do you disagree with any of the facts as they laid them out?
So I think I'm having trouble with the as they laid them out, because that's what I like.
They're not saying what TDM. The investigators are not commenting on TDM's accuracy, but all they did was lay out when TDM did in fact issue these warnings and watch. Do you disagree with their timeline of events? Do you disagree with the facts as they laid them out? Because I don't believe the investigators were in TDM Central saying, hey, this is right or wrong. They just said, hey, TDM issued these warnings at these times and these folks received them. So taking out the accuracy of TDM's warnings, which I get you have a problem with, do you disagree with any other part? Do you disagree with any factual part of the investigators' report as they laid it out?
No, sir. But also, I was talking about the National Weather Service,
or National Weather Service, or whatever that is. I'm saying all the investigators did was say, hey, this National Weather Service or TDM or whomever issued these watches and warnings at these times. So just as a whole,
yes,
are there any facts, just as they laid them out, not commenting on, just as they laid them out, do you disagree with any of the facts that the investigators laid out yesterday?
Then no, sir, other than the fact we are deficient on counselors.
Okay. Can I get the answer from each one of you, please? Do you disagree with any of the investigators' facts as they laid them out?
I thought it was a great report. The only parts that I disagree with, Mr. Chairman, is that I think she was inferring that we got the notices from TDM or TDM had notified our local officials, and that did not happen. And also, she said at various times that we were complacent. I disagree with that. And then just reiterating that I feel like it could be expanded on. I know they were given instructions 8 months after the flood to investigate, and they did a wonderful job in the 2 months they investigated. But I wish they would have talked to some of the other people that lost lives in our community or were affected from this flood and some of the experts.
Understood. And that would be you wanted them to do something different. You're not disputing the facts as they laid them out, other than what you've just testified to.
That's correct.
Okay, very good. Mrs. Eastland?
I don't recall when I was hearing it disputing many of the facts. Leslie Eastland was actually in Hunt, Texas, not in Ingram.
Okay.
That was one fact I remembered. Other than that, while they were laying it out, I thought they did a good job, but maybe.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Eastland?
I agree that they did a very thorough job. I'm sure there's
Understood.
I'm sure there's one or two things that I probably think that didn't happen that way, but they did a good job.
All right, but by and large, you all consensus believe the investigators' report, as they laid it out, was factually accurate, and they did a good job by and large. Is that fair to say?
Yes, the only thing I would add, Mr. Chairman, is I disagree with that she said we did not have a written emergency plan. I know if dishes or any experts would have told us to do something differently, we would have changed it. I know Edward already testified to that. But yes,
Okay.
Obviously it didn't work in this case.
Okay. And then as you sit here today, not what you thought at the time, as you sit here today, do you agree the camp was not prepared for this tragedy? And I want each one of you to answer that question. Looking back, hindsight, as you sit here today, do you agree the camp was not prepared for this tragedy?
We were not prepared for this flood.
Thank you.
I believe we acted reasonable based on the facts that we knew at the time. But yes, we were not prepared for this natural disaster.
Very good. Mrs. Eastland?
No, we were not prepared.
Mr. Eastland?
Not for this level, no, sir.
And do you agree, and again, each one of you to answer, please, the camp didn't timely call for an evacuation? Looking back today.
Looking back today, I think if we had a little more time, I think we could have gotten everybody.
I would agree with you, but do you believe the camp, looking back today, did not timely call for an evacuation?
If it did not, sorry, say it one more time.
Sure. Sitting here today, do you agree that the camp did not call for a timely evacuation?
So you're asking if we didn't try to evacuate?
Correct. Did you all evacuate timely that night, looking back today?
Did we do it at the right time, or did we do it at the speed?
Did you do it? Did you call for an evacuation at the right time to save lives, looking back today?
I think if we had a few more minutes, we would have gotten everybody.
Understood. But do you, looking back today, believe you timely evacuated that camp?
No.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Eastland?
No.
Mr. Eastland?
Mr. Chairman, with the obviously the knowledge we know now in 2020 hindsight, no, we did not.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Mr. Eastland?
I do agree with you, sir. I think the threshold, the red button, as y'all put it, that we should have pushed it earlier, but.
And again, hindsight, you did not timely evacuate this camp, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes,
All
sir.
right. Very good. All right, I've got some blocking and tackling, and I apologize if this is a little repetitive. I did try to keep up with everyone's questions, but I want to drill down into a couple of things. So, and by the way, this one can be anybody answer, and I will appreciate it. Did y'all testify earlier that you were not aware of the flash flood watch that was in place on July 3rd?
I was not aware.
All right. Were any of y'all aware?
I was not aware, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
I was not personally aware of that, no, sir.
What is personally? Give me the.
Personally, but I believe my father was.
Okay, understood. Mr. Eastland, were you aware?
I don't think I was aware. No,
Okay.
sir.
And then, were there any protocols at the camp in the event of a flash flood watch? Any protocols in place? And then one of y'all can answer this for me.
No.
No, I don't believe so. No, sir.
Okay. Did a flash flood watch require any additional vigilance with respect to monitoring the weather?
I would say yes. If we knew there was a flash flood watch, we would be more vigilant watching the forecast.
Okay,
Yes.
so that's what you do. Were there any protocols to do something more different in the event of a flash flood warning?
Calls.
Did a flash flood warning trigger an event other than removing of canoes, perhaps?
No, sir. Again, just about monitoring, seeing where it was, and then taking action based upon that.
Mr. Chairman, and just to correct, I mean, I believe that my father, it was the getting 2 inches of rain that he moved the equipment out. It wasn't
Okay, I'm sorry.
It wasn't
Understood.
flooding yet. Yeah.
Understood. What type of training did camp staff receive about emergency planning for flooding? What was the training? And Ms. Eastland may have testified to it earlier. Was the training only stay in place and then we'll come tell you something different? Or was there more to it that I missed?
We talked about what to do in the event of a flood, to go to your cabin and make sure all your campers were there. And we talked about if they're on time off, what to do if they're on time off and it's raining in a raining event, to call us, and because the danger is the low water crossings on 39. And so we talked about that. And those were the main, we touched on it a few times throughout orientation.
Okay, and Mrs. Eastland, did the nurses also receive that type of training?
They receive a different training. They aren't with the counselors in training.
Understood, but did they receive any type of emergency preparedness training for flooding?
Similar to that, yes, sir.
Okay, just similar to what the counselors received?
Yes, sir, and they have a different handbook and manual that they abide by.
Okay, and Mr. Easton, what about the kitchen workers? Did they receive emergency preparedness training?
I do not believe so, sir.
Okay, and what about the grounds crew? Did they receive emergency preparedness training?
I don't believe so. They were just notified by us when situations would arise.
Okay, so how many total do we have, those working in the kitchen and grounds crew? How many adults total, would you say? And I know it varies, but give me an approximation.
With both camps?
No, just camp, well, yeah, both camps, sure.
I hired 24 Polish staff, I believe, for 25, and so that would be camp store workers, dining hall workers, and kitchen workers, and then how many men? 21. And 21 men from Mexico.
Okay, so we had about approximately 45 adults who received 0 emergency preparedness training. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. All right, on to the evacuations. And I know we've gone over this, but so the evacuation plan for the Guadalupe River camp as it existed before July 4th flood, in your own words, what was the evacuation plan? And I know you had mentioned that your father had go to rec hall. Was that the evacuation plan that could be referenced prior to July 4th? Is that fair?
Are you meaning an evacuation plan for all disasters, or you're specifically to the flood?
Specifically to the flood.
Yes, sir. You are correct. That was enacted 2 times that I know of, which was 87 and 78. But previous floods during my childhood, I don't think that it was enacted.
Understood. So that was done in 78 and 87. But did Mr. Eastland, prior to this year's camp, sit down with the 4 of you, or sit down with any camp counselors, or sit down with any grounds crew, or sit down with anybody working in the commissary and have that discussion? This is our plan in case it floods.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just only say that plan has been seen by thousands for two decades. The posted emergency plan in our, and if dishes or any expert, anybody had asked us to update it, we would have.
Understood. But from y'all's testimony, the plan was go to rec hall, right? Is that fair?
Yes, sir. To
Okay.
take the campers and counselors there.
All right. And then my question was, did Mr. Eastland, to your knowledge, tell any of the workers or any of the counselors or even y'all, this is the plan in case it floods? We're all going to rec hall prior to this past summer.
I don't believe so. He never told me that.
Very good. Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else?
No, sir.
Okay.
I've heard the stories from that.
Understood.
time,
And
but
I get where you all
not
have
like
arrived at. Oh, I'm so
Right.
sorry. Go ahead.
But not like an instruction.
That was my question. Did he instruct y'all this way? Either one of y'all?
That's correct.
Okay. And then is it fair to say that the point in which campers would no longer shelter in place would actually evacuate cabins was a judgment call by your dad?
To begin the evacuation?
To say, hey, look, shelter in place is no longer working. Is it fair to say that would have been a judgment call made by your dad?
He did, yes.
Yes.
That night, he made that
Okay.
call right after the Francis radio call.
Understood. Okay. But there was no objective criteria that triggered evacuation, and I know we passed legislation that has changed that. Thank you, Chairman Perry and Chairman Darby, such as NWS flash flood warning or water coming into a cabin. There was no trigger event. It was your father's gut feel.
The River Century towers that we put in, as many as 100 in our community, that it's in real time. That is the trigger now. That all camps and residents, it takes the human factor out.
Understood. And then I'm going to ask this question of the four of y'all, and then I'd like to get to each one of the workers and the counselors as well. Did you, the four of you, have any assigned responsibility in the event of a flood evacuation?
No.
Mr. Eastland?
No, sir.
Gentlemen?
No, sir. Other than my dad, you're talking about the four of us.
Correct.
No, we just wait for instructions from my father.
Understood. And then I assume, but I want to make sure, and one of y'all can answer this, the same is true for the nurses, the same is true for the ground crew, the same is true for the kitchen. None of those individuals, specifically adults, or counselors for that matter, had any assigned responsibility in the event of a flood evacuation. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay. All right. Well, interesting thing from the investigator's report that I noted, and honestly, I don't think it's been addressed as of yet, is that the big three counselors stated on social media that they were awakened around 3 a.m. to help evacuate campers. But I hadn't heard anything since they did their post. Do we know if that's true? Do we know who woke them? Do we know if they actually did evacuate campers? Do we have any knowledge about these statements that they were awoken at 3 a.m. and asked to help evacuate?
I don't know. I don't know that I didn't know they were awoken to help evacuate. It might have been Glenn coming to their cabin. I think some of the big three went over to Rec Hall early on when the campers were first arriving, but I can't tell you exactly what they were doing.
Okay. Does anyone else have any knowledge about that? All right. And then Speaker Moody, Mr. Eastland started going down a path with you, and I just want to kind of finish its logical conclusion and get an answer to a question that I asked yesterday as well, and you may have heard me ask it of the investigators. Why did you think that at the time, at 3:20, it was proper to instruct Jumble House to evacuate, but then not instruct any of the other cabins like Twins or Bubble, when we know there was a critical, 10, 15-minute time period in there? Why should the girls in Jumble House evacuate to the Rec Hall and the girls in Bubble weren't told the same thing? Or the girls in Twins weren't told the same thing? It was a question in my mind.
Yes, sir. I understand your concern. It was just, as I was going backwards, the counselor got my attention in Jumble House. And my priority at that time was to get my truckload of girls back to Rec Hall. I didn't know we were going to run out of time.
No, I understood that you didn't know what the future would hold, but if you were to
Right.
tell one cabin to evacuate, would it make logical sense to then tell other cabins to evacuate if that was the correct move? Because as you saw it, and it was the correct move, and I understand the course of events and all of that, but that was the correct move there, and I was just wondering why you didn't provide that type of evacuation. Hey, girls, let's get the counselors and let's get over to Rec Hall.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I wish I had.
Understood. And then the other question I have, and I know that we've touched on a little bit, is y'all talked about and getting the ground crew, and how many were there that helped remove the canoes?
It was either 8 or 9.
Okay. So, and again, just going through, and I realize, that night a lot was going on, chaos. But you all got on the walkie-talkies to get them to come get the equipment. And I get things changed as the water was rising. But why did it not occur to you, sir, to do the same thing? I mean, I know your dad didn't do it. He didn't ask the grounds crew to help evacuate kids. Why didn't that enter your mind that I have, however many adults, 10 to 15 in that little area we were talking about, to get on a walkie-talkie and say, hey, look, me, my dad, the night watchman, we're doing all we can. We're working hard. But there are 15 of y'all just sitting here. Why did you not get on the walkie-talkie and say, hey, come help us? Because y'all did it for the canoes. Why didn't we do it for the girls?
Right, I understand that, and absolutely, I think we were just, it was all happening so fast, and those things that would have helped us, again, I go over and over and over again.
Understood.
And I wish I had done things like that.
Understood. And I do believe Senator Kolkhorst is exactly right. This is all of these events that we are going through, all of these questions that we are asking you all camp owners throughout the state of Texas need to be paying attention to this. All of them. All of them should be paying attention to this. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions.
Yes, there you go. Thank you, Chairman Meyer. Thank you all again for being here. This is a terrible, terrible event for everyone. I've heard a lot of questions that I had have been addressed by the panel, and thank you for answering them. I know you didn't have to be here if you didn't want to, given the environment. So I heard a little bit earlier, I believe it was you, Mr. Eastland, that said we were ready. But I'm glad to hear your response where you said, well, I was going to ask you, do you still think you were ready? And you answered, no, you were not prepared, not ready.
You mean, Mr. Chairman, you mean getting ready for camp?
We were ready, that we were ready for the flood, an emergency.
Oh.
We quoted you as we were ready. And I thought, well, the facts presented showed that you were not. Would you agree with that? And you already agreed with that. I think I've already said that you were not ready, not prepared.
We were ready for the information that was given to us. Yeah, we weren't ready for this type of natural disaster. That's correct.
So we weren't ready. So I guess the objective here at the final, I think for all of us, of course, we want to honor everyone who perished that night, the children, your dad, 119 other citizens in Kirk County that I represent. That all of us want to have the end result be that we are ready for the next one. And we're very concerned that those like you and others in the industry that have children are prepared, that they take emergency management and preparedness seriously. Now, you may have had a paradigm before the 4th of July that said, well, this is the way we've always done it. Or maybe if the water line doesn't get to that cypress tree down there, well, that's our measure. Not to say yours was. But that kind of mindset cannot continue. So I'll touch just briefly, I'm not saying that your dad, what we're hearing, he loved the children, but he was set in that he had a lot of knowledge. So given the knowledge you have now, 4 inches of water when you have a flood warning, not a flood watch, but 4 inches of water meant something to him, I heard. It concerned him. 4 inches there meant he knew that was, I think, can't be in his head, but I could surmise that when a man of his experience knew that 4 inches and a warning was serious. And that his mind was probably, well, things are fixing to get bad. So if you hear in the future that you have, of course we put it in statute, but do you have a different mindset on what a flood warning is now? Do you all have a different perspective on what a flood warning is? Whether you think it's going to come or not, are you seriously going to take the actions required when a flood warning is issued? And any other camp and anybody else who hears it knows what that means? So I ask you, do you see it differently now?
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman, yes, I've always taken flash flood warnings very seriously, but definitely with knowing what we all now know about this river, we're going to take things even more seriously. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
And from the facts that's related yesterday and from the time the investigation and the facts that we've gotten, I can only imagine, Edward, what was going through your mind and the actions that you were taking, and you did save some children. But I would pose to you that the crux of my concern, I guess, about all of us, is how you in this industry, how you prepare for emergencies. How your staff is prepared, how everyone has a role and is rehearsed, so when these things come, you're ready. Talked about chaos. This is emergency management is a lot like, and Nim would agree, it's a managed chaos. But it's chaos totally if you're not prepared through all layers, and especially those that have children in their care in these camps. People that depend on you, like what your dad was quoted as saying, you're safe here. This is the safest place on earth. And you do that by preparation and training at all levels for any contingency, planning for the worst. And so we have to be assured that you and others in the industry have that mindset. And when we can talk about evacuation. Evacuation means to get out. But how do you go about that? Is what we had, the evidence showed that in the investigation that people didn't know what to do. They didn't know. And even if you said to get out, how and where, it's basic. But those adults and counselors and the stories of what they did are magnificent. Magnificent. The bravery, the care, but they still didn't have any direction. They did not know, but they should have known. Going forward, that's what we should expect. And I know that listening to the facts, and that's what we wanted, the facts that demonstrate that because that was not there, things happened. Because that was not there, there was chaos. There was confusion in the midst of a terrible storm and flood. But still, preparation helps navigate that tremendously. Would you not agree with that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So if I was to ask you, what would you tell us that you're going to do moving forward, having learned these facts as they are? What would you tell the parents that you've learned from this moving forward to make sure that this wouldn't happen again? What would you say? Any of you?
I'm sorry.
Oh, you don't just answer if you want,
Yes,
if you want to, but you're not compelled to, please.
I would say that our idea of safety has obviously, it's increased. It's something we think about all the time now. Could we have done this? Could we have done that? And now we're thinking about it in other ways too. I think about it even in the long term. What happens when 10 years go by? What happens when 20 years go by? How can we put things in place where it's taken seriously and where things are in place getting better, they're reviewed, that we're always thinking about safety before anything else.
Thank you for that. Well, that's, I think, ultimately, a measure of our success will be in that we are better prepared as a state, in our local communities, as Chairman Meyer has said before, at all levels, working together to be better prepared, because it will happen again. It's coming back. And if we just have a hearing and then do nothing, then that's when we're doing a disservice. But I don't believe anybody sitting on this dais, and I don't believe anybody out there in the audience or anybody listening will have that expectation that we're just going to have a hearing and say, oh, well, let's move on to the next thing. No. We've already passed some legislation, and we're going to continue into the next session with Chairman Perry and Chairman Meyer and other members to continue to make Texas better prepared and working together to make this happen. This shouldn't happen again. Shouldn't have happened in the first place, but it's dang sure shouldn't happen again, ever. So I know this is difficult, and healing's going to be slow, but we're still in a position where we have a God that loves us and loves you, and together we'll make our state a safer place and navigate through this together and learn from it. And not say, oh, well, that's what happened. No, we're going to learn from it and make it better. Mr. Chairman, thank you. So it'd be, what, 3:05? 2:36. What? 2:36. The Senate General Investigating Committee on July 23rd, 25. And thank you all very much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you,
for
sir.
having us.
No, thank you. Thank you. With that, you're dismissed.
Without objection, the committee will recess until 2:36.
The Senate General Investigating Committee of July 2025 flooding events will recess until 2:36, at which time the committee will reconvene at today's hearing.